The market was busy due to an ongoing fair. There a boy was walking with a bowl of leftover food. His name was Pyo Wol, 14 years of age. He was an orphan and a drifter. While walking, a man in a dark robe approached him. The scene now shifts to Pyo Wol being in a dark, confined space. He couldn't move his body and it was pitch black darkness. He was hungry and scared. He began reciting his name and his parents. His senses came back after a while and he could move his body. He was underground. He moved towards the wall, but it was in vain. He wanted to survive. There a sudden someone approached him. It was his self-imagination asking him why he is so desperate to survive. He should give up as there was no value to his worthless life. MC declined, not until he stabs the one who trapped him here. He can't rest even in death. Thus, desperate to survive, he lifts himself up with great struggle. He moved towards the sound of falling water and found moss growing on the walls. He was hungry, so without knowing it was edible or not, he ate the moss. After regaining strength in his legs, he moved around and found out he was confined in a tight space of 3 by 3 room. There was an iron door in one side with a hole in it from which the food came. It was leftover and rotten food meant to give to animals. He smelled the food and found out it was 5 different kind of leftovers, thus there were more people who confined him here. It was highly likely that there were also more people confined like him here. He couldn't understand their goal, but that was for later on. Now he need to eat and survive. The MC was doing his usual exercises, muscle straining in the cramped stone chamber. It had been 4 months since he was thrown into this place. 4 months of silence, darkness, and a single meal shoved through the slot each day. By now, he could see in the pitch-black void as if it were faint twilight. The damp floor crawled with insects, some skittering over his feet, others vanishing into cracks he had learned to ignore. Then he felt a shift, soft, cold scales brushing against his wrist. A snake coiled around his arm, its body tightening. Its eyes glowed a deep, eerie red as it lifted its head, staring straight into his. Before he could react, it struck, its fangs sinking into his hand with a sharp, burning pain. The pain hit him like a burning wave. He collapsed onto the cold stone floor, writhing as the venom spread through his veins. Every heartbeat felt like fire tearing through his body. His breath broke into ragged gasps, his vision blurring despite the darkness. He clawed at the ground, trying to endure, but the agony was overwhelming. Eventually, his strength gave out and he slipped into unconsciousness. When he opened his eyes again, the slot screeched and a metal tray slid in. Food. Somehow he was still alive. He snatched it up instantly, devouring it with trembling hands. His body still ached, but he could move. He could think. And strangely, the darkness no longer felt dark. He could see everything, the walls, the insects, even the faint shimmer of moisture on the stones. His gaze shifted. There, coiled silently in the corner, was the very snake that had bitten him, watching him with those same glowing red eyes. Slowly, the MC lifted his arm toward the snake. It didn't lunge this time, just watched him, tongue flickering, eyes glowing like embers in the dark. He understood now. Because of this creature, he could see without light. Because of its bite, his body had changed. And he had heard the tales. Survive enough venom and the poison becomes your shield. He needed strength, any strength, if he was ever going to take his revenge. The snake curled around his wrist, its scales cold against his skin. Then, without hesitation, it struck. Fangs sank into his flesh. Venom surged into his veins. This time he didn't scream. His whole body trembled, muscles contracting violently, but he clamped his jaw shut and endured. He pressed his forehead to the ground and let the fire rip through him, refusing to collapse. Hours passed in agonizing silence. He didn't stop. He didn't break. And the snake did not leave his side. He woke hours later, body still trembling from the venom. His breath was ragged, but he was alive. Then he felt it, vibrations faint but unmistakable. The iron door scraped open with a harsh metallic groan. For the first time in 4 months, he stepped outside the darkness of his cell. The air was cold and carried a foul stench, a smell of decay. Compelled by instinct, he followed it to a nearby room. There on the floor lay a boy, around his own age, face pale, limbs stiff, the flesh already beginning to rot. A failed survivor. He looked at the corpse for a moment. No pity, only resolve. He continued down the hallway, each step echoing in the silent corridor, until he stood before a massive iron gate. He pushed. The door groaned open. Inside he saw them. Children his age, gaunt and exhausted, huddled together like livestock waiting for slaughter. Their eyes widened as he entered. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. Pyo Wol stepped out through the iron door. Two figures stood ahead, a boy and a girl both around his age. Their eyes squinted, and used to the darkness he moved through so naturally. He walked past them without a sound. The girl's voice trembled. Who are you? He turned slightly. Pyo Wol. They exchanged glances before answering. My name is So Yo-wol, the girl said softly. And I'm Song Chin-woo, the boy added. Pyo Wol nodded once. I came from the adjacent sector. Their expressions froze. No one was supposed to survive alone in another sector. Ignoring the shock, Pyo Wol continued forward. The stench grew heavier. Rotting corpses of children lay scattered along the hallway, silent reminders of despair. He opened another iron door and gestured. Follow me. They clasped each other's hands and stayed close behind him in the pitch dark. Beyond the next door was another chamber filled with children of the same age. Pyo Wol walked through the rooms inspecting quietly. A few more bodies, but here the dead hadn't starved, they had taken their own lives. He frowned. The food distribution here was better, more than enough to survive. Whoever imprisoned them was deliberately discriminating, separating children by unknown criteria. But for what purpose? Behind him, So Yo-wol was already speaking with the others, and soon they introduced the group to Pyo Wol. He didn't linger. Pyo Wol pushed open the next iron door. A blinding white light slammed into their eyes. The children shielded their faces, thinking they were finally outside. But they weren't. As the light faded, a vast underground structure revealed itself. An enormous house with a courtyard, built like a mansion buried beneath the earth. A prison disguised as a home, or a training ground for something far worse. Pyo Wol stepped inside the large underground building, but the moment he entered, he noticed something was off. The place was empty, no furniture, no traces of life. The walls were uneven, the supports roughly placed. It looked less like a home and more like a structure thrown together in a hurry, as if whoever built it cared only about function, not comfort. As he examined the crude interior, soft footsteps approached him. A girl with stark white hair emerged from the shadows. Her expression was unreadable, but her steps carried quiet confidence. My name is Lee Min, she said, stopping uncomfortably close. Pyo Wol instinctively shifted back, caught off guard by her sudden approach. She stared at his face, no at his eyes. They're beautiful, she murmured. Your eyes, they're red. Pyo Wol froze. Red? He hadn't noticed any change. It had to be the side effect of the red-eye snake's bite. A subtle transformation, barely visible unless someone looked closely. Before he could respond, So Yo-wol walked up with a few other children behind her. We've decided to stick together, she said. It's safer that way. You should join us. Her tone was composed, but her eyes held a quiet plea. The others watched Pyo Wol, waiting for his answer. I'll see, he replied curtly. He wasn't rejecting them out of coldness. In truth, he knew they were still in the dark. They had no idea what lay ahead, what kind of trials or traps awaited them. Moving blindly as a group could be just as dangerous as being alone. So Yo-wol nodded reluctantly. As the other children banded together for comfort and survival, Pyo Wol turned away. He walked ahead on his own, alert and silent, trusting only his instincts. In a place built by unknown hands beneath the earth, surrounded by corpses and frightened children, he couldn't afford to trust anyone, not yet. The children quickly divided themselves into 4 groups, each led by someone with a loud voice or strong presence. Pyo Wol was the only one who stayed alone, not fitting into any of their makeshift alliances. He continued to explore the underground structure. The walls were too clean, the wooden beams too new, the soil around the foundation freshly disturbed. This place wasn't old. It was recently built, and whoever built it had poured a massive amount of money into the hidden facility. As he pieced things together, a metal hatch suddenly clanked open high above. A rope unwound and a large basket descended into the courtyard. The children swarmed toward it instantly. Food. But before chaos could break out, So Yo-wol stepped forward and raised her voice. Stop. The food will be managed by the group leaders. No fighting. The 4 budding leaders gathered around the basket, trying to look authoritative. Pyo Wol approached calmly. I'll be taking my share. When he reached for the basket, a hand blocked his path. Yeom Il-jung, one of the group leaders, glared at him. No one takes food without permission. Pyo Wol's expression hardened. In the next second, he grabbed Yeom Il-jung's face with a single hand and slammed him onto the ground, pinning him down. One palm pressed the boy's neck, the other forced his cheek and eye painfully into the dirt. What did you say? Pyo Wol asked coldly. Say it again. Panic erupted around them. Stop. Don't kill him. But Pyo Wol didn't loosen his grip. His irritation was boiling over. These kids, already trying to impose control, already fighting for dominance when they didn't even understand their situation. So Yowol rushed forward. Stop, she said firmly. Pyo Wol didn't look at her. Why should I? So Yowol swallowed but answered clearly, because none of the group leaders will object to you getting your share. I'll make sure of it. That was enough. Pyo Wol released Yeom Iljung with a final shove, leaving the boy trembling on the ground. The others stared at him with a mix of fear and awe. He took only what he needed, then walked away and ate alone. He wasn't angry about the food. He understood exactly what this was. A test. Someone was observing them, evaluating who was useful, who was dominant, who would break, who would survive. These children, all of them would eventually become enemies in the struggle ahead. It didn't matter to him. Later, so Yowol approached again. Now everyone views you as a threat, she said. An enemy. Pyo Wol looked at her calmly. But you benefited the most. She blinked, confused. Most of Yeom Iljung's members joined your group, he said. You purposely ate less to earn their trust. That makes you the strongest group now. So Yowol's eyes widened. She hadn't expected him to see through her so easily. I keep an eye on everyone, Pyo Wol added quietly. That's how you survive in a place like this. The next day when the basket descended, the food inside was far less than before. Seeing this, Pyo Wol immediately understood. The real test had begun. The children panicked and argued, groups clashing over the shrinking rations. Pyo Wol took only what he needed and stepped away, knowing this was all deliberate. From now on, survival would reveal everyone's true nature. Mak Nozum, the smallest and weakest child in Seo Yowol's group, had worked harder than anyone just to keep up. But the next morning, his cold, lifeless body was found in a corner of the underground hall. The children cried, some in rage, others in silent fear. Yet everyone understood why he died. He was the easiest target. Seo Yowol's eyes hardened. She wanted revenge, not in chaos but with the same method. Eliminate the weakest in the enemy groups. And so, an invisible war began. Each night, as the lights dimmed and fear took over, a child from a different group disappeared forever. Sleep became dangerous. Trust vanished. Every group watched one another, whispering, suspecting, counting who would vanish next. The underground had turned into a silent battlefield. And only the ruthless would survive. Pyo Wol quietly scraped the damp moss from the wall and ate in silence. The underground was pitch black, but he could sense movement, 4 figures creeping toward him. Yeom Iljung. Even with one damaged eye, his killing intent leaked like poison. They thought the darkness would give them an advantage. They were wrong. The moment they lunged, Pyo Wol melted into the shadows. A muffled gasp, a choke, a thud. One by one, the children were dragged into silence, their bodies collapsing unseen. Soon, only Yeom Iljung remained. He swung wildly at the darkness, panic swallowing him as every attack hit nothing but air. When Pyo Wol finally stepped into faint view, Yeom Iljung's back was already pressed against the wall. I'll serve you, he stammered, trembling. I'll do anything, just spare me. Pyo Wol looked at him, not with anger but with the cold clarity of someone who understood betrayal too well. You're not someone who obeys, he said. Yeom Iljung's scream was short. After that, only silence remained. Pyo Wol disappeared back into the darkness. The next morning, screams echoed through the underground. The bodies of Yeom Iljung and his entire group were found scattered across the dark hall. Every group leader exchanged tense glances. No one said it aloud but they all knew the truth. Pyo Wol had done it. From that moment, none of them dared provoke him. The infighting intensified among the remaining children, and by nightfall, yet another group was erased, this time swallowed whole by Seo Yowol's growing faction. Meanwhile, away from the chaos, Pyo Wol climbed onto the roof beams and silently observed the structure above them. The layout was strange. Every corridor, every room, it wasn't random. It was an exact replica of a building style he had seen before, as if someone wanted the children to memorize it unconsciously. A realization chilled him. They weren't being tested for survival. They were being trained, raised as assassins. The next day, the hatch opened much faster than usual. Seo Yowol glanced at Pyo Wol. She could sense something was off. Even Pyo Wol felt a faint tension in the air. Then they descended. Masked men. Without a word, they rushed into the hall and began beating the children with long sticks, striking backs, legs, and ribs mercilessly. Screams filled the underground. Many tried to fight back. Most were knocked down instantly. Pyo Wol did not resist. He curled his body, absorbing the blows quietly. Drawing attention now would be a mistake. He knew better than to challenge enemies without knowing their true strength. As he endured, he noticed something. 3 masked men stood apart. Not beating anyone, not moving aggressively. They were the ones truly in control. The real handlers behind this entire hell. One of the 3 masked overseers finally raised his hand. Enough. The beating stopped instantly. The hall fell silent except for the children's ragged breathing. I am First Sword, he said. Your lives are now under my control. From today onward, I will shape you, train you, and decide who among you deserves to live. One guy protested and questioned him. Before the sentence even finished, the boy's head fell to the ground, cleanly severed. Blood splattered across the floor. The children froze in horror. No one, he said calmly, will speak without my permission. His voice echoed through the underground like a death sentence. You will not question. You will not resist. You exist to obey. And the children understood. This was no training hall. This was a slaughterhouse shaping killers. The scene shifted to a dimly lit chamber behind the underground facility. First Sword stood with his subordinate, the air thick with the smell of oil and steel. You know how a curse poison is made? First Sword began. You place hundreds of insects in a sealed jar, and let them devour each other. Only the most vicious, the most resilient, the most cunning survives. He looked back toward the underground hall. That is exactly what we are doing with these children. His subordinate bowed. Yes, sir. Report, First Sword demanded. Who stands out? Pyo Wol, sir, the subordinate answered. She leads the largest group. Calm, calculating, capable. 2 others show promise as well. First Sword's gaze sharpened. And the sole survivor of Sector 1? Pyo Wol. His endurance is abnormal, sir. Sector 1 had harsher conditions and much less food. Yet he survived alone. Keep an eye on all of them, First Sword said. With that, he turned and walked away. As he reached his private quarters, he opened a sealed message delivered earlier. A single line appeared on the scroll. To the Blood Shadow Captain. Target for assassination. Duration 7 years. Reward upon completion. 500,000 gold yang. First Sword's eyes narrowed. A target worth 500,000 gold. This was no ordinary mission. The children were gathered before the tall building with a red flag on its roof. A masked man declared, Your goal is simple, reach the flag. Coldly he added, Whoever comes last, will suffer worse than hell. At once the children sprinted in panic. Pyo Wol moved quietly among them, not racing but calculating. Pyo Wol made sure not to stand out. The instructors were already wary of the lone survivor from Sector 1, so he kept his movements quiet and unremarkable. During rest hours he sat alone, reading the thunder-splitting technique again and again. Pyo Wol approached him, curious. Why do you keep reading the same page? She asked. Pyo Wol didn't answer. His eyes never left the text. Realizing he wouldn't speak, she quietly walked away. Soon after, the courtyard echoed with shouts. The instructors ordered the children to duel each other, testing strength, instinct, and cruelty. One by one, the terrified children stepped into the circle. And survival became the only rule. During his duel, Pyo Wol's opponent suddenly lunged with a real knife. Not to win but to kill. Pyo Wol's eyes narrowed. He glanced toward the instructors. And saw that none of them intended to stop it. They were watching silently as if murder was part of the lesson. The attacks grew wild and relentless, the boys slashing like a cornered animal. It annoyed Pyo Wol more than it frightened him. He didn't want to stand out. He didn't want to reveal his true ability. So he dropped his knife. The opponent rushed in, thinking he had the advantage. Only to have Pyo Wol step forward and drive a sharp kick into his gut, sending him collapsing to the ground, choking for breath. The instructors exchanged satisfied nods. The children were improving, becoming faster, sharper, more ruthless. But it still wasn't enough. Their true target was someone far more dangerous. And so the training would grow harsher, more brutal. And many of the children would not survive what came next. The boy lay on the ground, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle, broken from Pyo Wol's counter. An instructor immediately walked toward them, his presence colder than steel. Did you do this? He asked. Yes, Pyo Wol replied calmly. Before the word fully left his mouth, a blade was already at his neck. Pyo Wol hadn't even seen the instructor draw it. A thin line of cold metal pressed against his skin, unmoving, deadly. For a moment the entire courtyard froze. Then the instructor slowly withdrew the sword and turned away. As he walked back he spoke without looking at Pyo Wol. An assassin does not leave traces. His voice was flat, merciless. If you strike, you kill, not injure. The lesson was clear. From here on, hesitation meant death. They should not leave any traces behind. 6 years passed in the blink of an eye. The training hall had changed, and so had the children, now hardened teenagers with sharp eyes and quicker hands. A masked guard stood at the center of the room, scanning every shadow, every corner, searching for the trainees who had scattered and hidden at his command. One by one he dragged them out, behind pillars, inside crates, under stairwells. His steps were silent, but his presence was overwhelming. None of them escaped him. None except one. Time passed. Minutes stretched. His patience thinned. Finally, the masked guard exhaled sharply. Enough. Come out. I know you're here. There was no response. But then, a faint shift of fabric. Right beside his feet, the old rugs slowly rose, and from beneath them emerged a boy no longer small. Pyo Wol, taller, sharper, eyes like a still pond. Completely grown from the frightened child he once was. The guard stared at him for a long moment. Pyo Wol had hidden in the one place no one ever checks, right in plain sight. Later that night, the trainees, now nearly adults, sat around a crackling fireplace. The cold stone corridors felt less hostile with the smell of roasting meat filling the air. They ate simple skewers, one of the few comforts they ever got. Pyo Wol glanced at the boy sitting across from him. His face wasn't his own. It was the face of a trainee who had died not long ago. A borrowed identity. You're using his face now? Pyo Wol asked quietly. The boy nodded without emotion. It's better than losing my place. Before the mood could sink further, Pyo Wol spoke, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. The food has changed, she said. They're giving us better meat. That only means one thing. Everyone looked up. We'll receive our first mission soon. Silence fell. The fire popped, and for a moment each of them felt the weight of what was coming. Their years of training were finally reaching the point of no return. The scene shifts to a dim-lit chamber deep within the hideout. The first sword removed his mask, revealing an aged face carved with scars and years of bloodshed. His lone eye flickered in the candlelight. 300 abducted, he muttered. Only 30 remain. Soon, their training will end. Footsteps echoed. The second sword and third sword entered, bowing slightly. Their presence tightened the already heavy air. It's nearly time, the first sword said, staring at the trembling candle flame. We'll see which of them survives the real world. They asked why he has taken off his mask. The first sword explained that it's been 6 years and it is too stifling, so they also took their masks off. They now discussed the children have exceeded their expectations, and it was very regretful that they will be discarded after this mission. They had no choice in this matter, said the first sword, and he pulled out a book from his robe. It was the final step. The children were gathered now. Everybody became adults. The first sword explained that 3 of them will learn these techniques and the other 27 children will try to kill them. They were again terrified of it as they have to kill yet again. The first sword clarified that this will be the last thing they will do before going out. Pyo Wol raised his hand saying he want to learn this. Pyo Wol confronted him saying he would be a scapegoat for others. He replied with a stern expression that they will see if he becomes a scapegoat or a wolf. The scene now shifts to a guy being stabbed. He is the second one to have learnt the technique by drawing lots. Song Chanwoo didn't want that, but he had no choice. Now only Pyo Wol was left. They discussed among how he was not seen after they had a training few days back. They wondered if killing the instructors was rather easy than confronting him. But Song Chanwoo explained that the instructors will surely have some countermeasure against them. After they left, Pyo Wol came out from the shadows. He was now thinking of how the instructors have pursued others to find him. It's his time now to find out about these instructors. Pyo Wol finally reached the deepest room of the mansion. Using turtle breathing and the thunder-splitting technique, he moved like a shadow, undetectable even to the guards outside. After searching every corner, he found the scroll. Target, Wu Gunsang. He didn't know the name, but anyone who required raising assassins for 7 years had to be someone enormous. Rage simmered inside him. They suffered all this because of one man. Just then, footsteps. He hid instantly. The first sword entered. His instinct screamed that someone had trespassed. Calling the second and third sword, they concluded the only one capable of this infiltration was Pyo Wol. He's grown too bold, the first sword said coldly. We will remind them all who holds their lives. He took out a sinister flute, the Hell Flute, a last resort measure. Outside, the children continued looking for Pyo Wol. Then the shrill, eerie sound rang through the compound. One by one, the children collapsed, writhing, trembling, clutching their bodies in unimaginable pain. Pyo Wol staggered. They had activated the restriction. The children writhed on the ground, screaming in pain as the restriction took hold. A sharp ringing pierced Pyo Wol's ears, the activation signal. But unlike the others, the pain barely slowed him. Using internal energy fusion, he examined the condition of those nearby. Lee Min was suffering the most. As he traced the sensation, realization struck him: it wasn't a technique. Poison. A poison triggered externally. And the only medium that fit was a poisonous insect, likely activated by sound. Footsteps echoed. Instead of fleeing and revealing that the restriction barely affected him, Pyo Wol dropped to the ground, convulsing, perfectly mimicking agony. The guards spotted him and shouted for an instructor. Moments later, the instructor arrived, eyes cold. Without hesitation, he drew his sword and drove it straight through Pyo Wol's shoulder. Blood spilled across the floor. The instructor demanded furiously, "What did you find in my room?" His sword flashed, killing intent pouring out as he prepared to strike again. Enough. The second sword stepped in, blocking the blade. "We still need him," he said calmly. "He's the finest assassin we've produced. This mission cannot be completed without Pyo Wol." The first sword snarled. "He's dangerous. Too difficult to control." The second sword's gaze hardened. "We can control him. The hell flute still binds him." Silence followed. Slowly, the first sword's rage cooled. He sheathed his weapon and turned to the guards. "Give them the antidote." Moments later, the pain vanished. The children collapsed in relief. The first sword then addressed them all coldly. "This happened because Pyo Wol infiltrated our base. Let this be a warning." His eyes swept over the survivors. "Anyone who dares to do the same will suffer far worse." The scene shifted to Pyo Wol, sitting alone in meditation, calmly reviewing everything that had happened. Piece by piece, the answer became clear. The snake bites he had suffered in the past had altered his body. His resistance to poison had grown far beyond normal limits. Footsteps echoed nearby. A group of trainees whispered among themselves, uneasy. They spoke about how Pyo Wol had always lived alone, hidden in the darkness, never relying on anyone. Suddenly, he appeared right behind them. They screamed in shock, stumbling back. Seo Yowol stepped forward, her expression serious. "You infiltrated the instructor's base," she said. "You must know something. What restriction did they place on us?" She stared at him closely. "You weren't here when it was activated. You came afterward, which means it had no effect on you." The others fell silent, watching him. Pyo Wol answered, "Yeah." Pyo Wol spoke calmly. "I know what kind of restriction was placed on you." They demanded answers immediately. He looked at them coldly. "Why should I tell you?" "We're comrades," one of them insisted. Pyo Wol's eyes narrowed. "Comrades don't hunt someone down to kill him with such zeal. You did just yesterday." The words struck deep. Silence followed. One of the group finally stepped forward. "Fine. I'll owe you a favor. When I join the floral performance troupe, I'll treat you favorably." Seo Yowol nodded. "I'll do the same. No one from my group will hinder you. I'll consider you a friend." Only then did Pyo Wol speak again. "It's curse poison," he said. "Activated externally." He paused. "Figure out the rest yourselves." They left, expressions grim. Only Lee Min remained. She hesitated, then said softly, "My real name is Lee Sealman." She met his gaze. "I'll treat you as a special friend." Pyo Wol said nothing, but he remembered the name. Sometime later, the first sword announced that they would finally leave the underground cave. The children were stunned. He ordered Seo Yowol to lead them once they emerged. The first sword, however, only wondered how many would survive outside. His retirement made it irrelevant to him. A large basket was lowered, and they ascended one by one. On the way up, Pyo Wol asked Seo Yowol about the poison. She explained that Lee Min's knowledge of curse poisons had helped neutralize it. As they rose, Pyo Wol tore his sleeve to cover his eyes and instructed the others to do the same. After 7 years in darkness, sudden light could blind them. When they emerged, a shadowy figure approached, the Blood Shadow Captain. He praised them for meeting the requirements to carry out the mission. Pyo Wol heard his voice and remembered it for his revenge. Later the children were taken to a new place. The children finally relaxed. Some cried at the sight of flowers, overwhelmed by something so ordinary after such suffering. Soon after, they were issued weapons. The mission was about to begin. The scene then shifts to a quiet inn, where the Blood Shadow Captain and the First Sword sat drinking together. The captain expressed his gratitude and informed the First Sword that his retirement had been approved. The First Sword thanked him in return and shared his thoughts, that the children were far too talented to be discarded after completing a single mission. The Blood Shadow Captain replied calmly that the request was clear. Once the mission ended, every trace had to be erased. Hearing this, the first sword asked a single question. Had the captain discovered who the requester was? The captain shook his head and refused to answer, saying it was wiser not to offend a powerful figure. He warned that until they possessed enough strength to stand on par with the 100 Wraith Union, the greatest assassin group in Jianghu, they needed to act carefully. If this mission was completed successfully, they would finally be one step closer to that goal. The scene then shifts to Pyo Wol quietly admiring his weapon. One of the others asked if he, of all people, was trembling. Pyo Wol replied calmly that he wasn't, though in truth it seemed the blade itself was trembling in his hand. He denied it without expression. Around him, the others exchanged menacing looks, barely concealing their anticipation. They couldn't wait to chop someone's head off. After some time, they were ordered to gather outside. Under strict instructions, they followed the fourth sword in complete silence. Beneath the full moon, the children moved flawlessly, keeping pace with him, something he silently admired, proof of their brutal training. They eventually reached their destination, and the fourth sword signaled them to hide. Pointing toward a manor perched on the mountainside, bathed in moonlight, he revealed that their target was inside. The sight froze them in place. It was the very same manor they had memorized again and again during 7 years in hell. A single thought ran through their minds. Who was this man to make them suffer for 7 years just to reach him? A few days earlier, within the gardens of the Amei sect, a young woman named Seol Ran walked quietly among blooming flowers. She was the youngest disciple of the sect's head, the feared abbess of 9 calamities. The abbess suddenly asked her if she resented her. Seol Ran shook her head and replied calmly that her life was constantly at risk, so feeling inconvenienced was only natural. Her answer enraged the abbess. She shouted, reminding Seol Ran that she had picked her up as an orphan from the streets and raised her herself. Instead of retreating, Seol Ran stepped forward and hugged her. She gently asked the abbess not to get so angry. The abbess sighed and revealed the truth. If negotiations with the Qingqing sect failed, they would have no choice but to follow the plan they had prepared for the past 7 years. Before she could say more, another disciple rushed in with urgent news. The deal with Qingqing had been finalized. This was what the abbess wanted, yet it came at a cost. For the sake of this alliance, Seol Ran, talented enough to become her successor, had been reduced to a political bargaining piece. Her disciple Zhonghua hesitantly asked what should be done about the assassins they had prepared. The abbess fell silent, deep in thought. The scene shifts to the present. Pyo Wol lay hidden underground alongside the others, waiting for nightfall. The plan was about to begin, yet unease crept into his chest. He instinctively expanded his senses, scanning the surroundings. Then, a spear suddenly pierced through the earth, impaling the man beside him. Blood sprayed across the soil. Pyo Wol froze. He couldn't comprehend the madness unfolding before him, or understand why this betrayal was happening now. The spear lodged in the ground had been thrown by a half-bald man standing atop the ridge. His eyes widened in satisfaction, so the intelligence had been correct. Assassins were hiding in the mountains of the Qingqing sect. Search the area, he commanded coldly. Kill them all. Pyo Wol immediately realized the disadvantage they were in. Without hesitation, he gave the signal to retreat. In the next instant, the assassins burst from their hiding places, scattering in every direction. The plan was simple. Break the encirclement first, then regroup later. Qingqing disciples gave chase. The half-bald man moved again. One spear flew. Then another. And another. Each throw was precise. One assassin after another was skewered mid-escape, bodies collapsing before they could even scream. Only one remained. The final spear shot toward Pyo Wol. He twisted his body and intercepted it with a sharp kick. The spear changed trajectory, blasting past the disciples and grazing the half-bald man's cheek. Blood trickled down. Fury exploded in the man's eyes. Leave no one alive. Pyo Wol struck decisively, cutting down the disciples who closed in on him. His movements were efficient, lethal, but the numbers were overwhelming. He understood immediately. This wasn't a fight he could finish. Survival came first. And so Pyo Wol vanished into the chaos, already searching for a path out of the slaughter. Watching Pyo Wol escape, the half-bald man's irritation deepened. He strode forward to one of the assassins who had been impaled by his spear, the man still crawling weakly across the ground. With his final breath, the assassin looked up, confusion and despair in his eyes. "I don't want to die," he whispered. "What did we ever do to you, to deserve this?" The half-bald man looked down on him with undisguised contempt. You dared to set foot against the prestigious Qingqing sect, he replied coldly. 4 mere assassins like you, that alone is reason enough to die. Without another word, he turned away, leaving the assassin's life to fade out. Pyo Wol ran without looking back. As he fled, a single question echoed in his mind: who leaked the intel? Among the assassins, only he knew the true identity of the target. The instructors had left before the mission began. Now it was clear. They hadn't been abandoned by accident. They had been discarded, to erase all evidence. A sharp whistle cut through the air. Pain exploded in his shoulder as an arrow struck him. Another followed. An archer was pursuing him relentlessly. Pyo Wol endured the pain, closed the distance, and ended the man in a single motion before plunging into the river below. Cold water swallowed him. As he surfaced downstream, he noticed a familiar mark, the secret blood code, smeared and distorted. Someone had survived. He followed it cautiously. He noticed that the pursuers were wearing different clothes, which concludes that more than one sect is pursuing them. Suddenly, a wave of killing intent surged. Pyo Wol twisted aside just in time, a blade grazing past his neck. He turned and froze. It was Li Min. Seeing Pyo Wol alive, her tense expression softened instantly. The grip on her blade loosened, relief washing over her face. For the first time since the betrayal began, neither of them stood alone. The moment Li Min saw Pyo Wol, the strength left her body. Her legs gave out. Pyo Wol caught her before she hit the ground and gently laid her down on the cold earth. Blood soaked through her clothes. Her breathing was shallow, too shallow. What about the others? He asked quietly. She shook her head weakly. Everyone scattered. Seo Yowol and Song Chinwoo stayed behind. They fought, so the rest of us could escape. Her eyes trembled. She already knew. I'm injured too badly, she whispered. I won't make it. Pyo Wol clenched his jaw. You don't want to live? She smiled faintly. Of course I do. But I know my body. I can't. She asked if he will stay beside her. She was scared to be alone in her final moments, but seeing him she was happy that at least she won, die alone. Her voice cracked. Why did this happen to us? What did we ever do wrong, to deserve this? Pyo Wol was silent for a moment. Then he told her everything. About Wu Gun Gang. About the Blood Shadow Group. About how they had been raised, used, and discarded. Nothing more than evidence meant to be erased. I'll take revenge, he said flatly. I swear it. Her hand tightened weakly around his sleeve. Survive, she whispered. No matter how. I just want, the ones who made me feel this despair, this pain, to suffer the same. Her breath faltered. Say my name, she asked softly. Not the fake one, my real name. Pyo Wol swallowed. Lee Sealman. A faint smile touched her lips. Thank you. Those were her last words. Her hand slipped from his sleeve. Her body grew still, cold against the earth. For a long moment, Pyo Wol didn't move. Then something inside him shattered. The grief burned away, replaced by something far darker. Killing intent poured out of him, thick and suffocating. He gently closed her eyes. I will kill them, he said quietly. Not as a promise. Not as rage. But as a fact. Every last bastard responsible for this. The moon above reflected coldly in his eyes. From this moment on, Pyo Wol would no longer merely survive. He would become the calamity that hunted them down. Deep within the mountains, inside a vast and secluded mansion, the Blood Shadow captain sat across from the fourth sword. The air between them was heavy. The plan collapsed at the last moment, the captain said calmly. 7 years of training, all wasted. The assassins we raised are gone. The fourth sword's eyes narrowed. You truly don't know who the requester was? The captain shook his head. And I don't intend to. Crossing that line would invite death. The order came by letter. Something about that answer unsettled the fourth sword. If they're erasing evidence, he said slowly, won't they come for us next? The captain scoffed. Arrogance is the privilege of survival. No one knows where we are. We'll remain hidden until the storm outside passes. As he spoke, the fourth sword picked up the letter lying on the table. His expression changed. There's a smell, he muttered. He brought it closer, faint, almost imperceptible. The Blood Shadow captain's smile vanished. Tracking incense. Silence fell. Their location had already been exposed. A guard came crashing through the gate, his body flung like debris as the doors shattered inward. Shouts erupted instantly. The mansion was under attack from all sides. The righteous sects, someone cried. The first sword reacted at once. Fall back. We can't face this many orthodox forces head-on. The fourth sword turned to the Blood Shadow captain. We have to retreat, now? But the captain already knew. There was nowhere left to run. Slowly he drew his blade. And then he charged. Blood sprayed as he tore through the attackers, every strike ruthless and precise. Screams echoed through the halls as bodies fell one after another. But even his killing spree couldn't stem the tide. Then, a new presence descended onto the battlefield. A woman stood before him, whisk in hand, robes marked with the emblem of Ame. Manhwa, disciple of the Abyss of 9 Calamities. The moment the captain saw her, understanding struck him like a blade. So it was you, he muttered. The requester. Don't utter a single word, Manhwa snapped, her voice filled with disgust. Filthy assassin. The captain laughed bitterly inside. I should have known. An orthodox sect hiring assassins to erase another orthodox sect's rising talent. The so-called righteous revealing their true faces. Hypocrites, every last one of them. Manhwa lunged forward without hesitation, her sword flashing toward his wounded body. The Blood Shadow captain met her strike head-on, sparks flying as steel clashed against steel. Two figures collided amid the chaos. One fighting to silence the truth, the other fighting to expose it. They battled relentlessly, each strike carrying killing intent. Only one of them would walk away alive. Blood Shadow captain fought tooth and nail against the hypocrite nun, knowing this would be his final battle. He unleashed everything he had left, blood, fury, and resolve. Though she knew he was an assassin who had stepped into the light from the shadows, she was still being overwhelmed. Then, without warning, another figure intervened. A blade flashed, and the captain's ankle was severed. As he crashed to the ground, blood soaking the earth, a familiar presence emerged. The leader of the Ame sect had arrived, the hypocrite old hag herself. Seeing her, the captain roared in rage, his voice echoing through the battlefield. Through clenched teeth, he screamed of betrayal. He finally understood. It was the Ame sect that had requested the assassination. And now they were here to erase all evidence, to preserve their false image as a righteous sect. Without hesitation, the old hag stabbed him, silencing his accusations, and walked past his dying body. Nearby, the first sword had already fallen, defeated by the youngest disciple who had come to meet her master. Soon after, an assassin was dragged forward. He was the leader of the assassins, the one who had accepted the request. Coldly, the old hag asked, "How many of you were there?" He refused to answer. Her power descended upon him, immense, merciless torture. Unable to endure it, he finally broke. 28, he gasped. Moments later, he died. And how many are dead? She asked. 24, came the reply. Her eyes narrowed. Find the rest quickly. Finish them. Then she turned to the youngest disciple, her voice calm and cruel. Prepare for the wedding. This is all for the sake of the sect. With that, the hypocrite old hag left. The scene shifted. A dark forest, silent and heavy with killing intent. At the gates of the Chinching sect, Pyo Wol stood alone. His eyes burned with fury. Revenge was no longer a thought, it was a vow. If they wished to brand him an enemy, then he would become one. He would hunt down everyone connected to this incident, and wipe them out without mercy. The next morning, a Chinching sect disciple left the mountain to gather herbs and medicinal plants. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Without warning, a shadow moved behind him. Before he could react, Pyo Wol struck from the back, locking the disciple in place and dragging him into the undergrowth. Cold steel brushed his throat. Speak, Pyo Wol said. Terrified, the disciple spilled everything. When asked about Wu Gunsang, the disciple hesitated, then answered. He is the sect's young prodigy. He has mastered nearly every martial technique of Chinching. The current sect leaders believe he will raise the sect to even greater heights. At those words, Pyo Wol's fury ignited. Because of him, they had suffered for 7 years. Pyo Wol's fingers moved with lethal precision, pressing the disciple's acupoints. Something shifted. The disciple staggered, then turned back, and froze in sheer horror. Standing before him was his own face. Pyo Wol's features had changed, perfectly mirroring the disciple's appearance. His voice followed, calm and merciless. Sleep. As the disciple collapsed, Pyo Wol straightened his robes. The disguise was complete. Without another glance back, he turned toward the mountain. Pyo Wol was ready to infiltrate the Chinching sect. Disguised as the Chinching disciple, Pyo Wol passed through the sect gates without resistance. The Chinching sect was bustling with people. Disciples moved in disciplined lines, Elders gave instructions and servants hurried between halls. The architecture struck him deeply. The layout, the courtyards, even the training grounds were nearly identical to the mansion where they had once been trained. A bitter chill crept into his chest. Soon he found himself standing before the residence of his target, Wu Gunsang. Elsewhere within the Qingqing sect, the sect leader and the elders were gathered in a closed meeting. Their expressions were grim. How could mere assassins dare attack a prestigious sect like ours? One elder spat. There must be someone behind them, another said coldly. We will uncover the mastermind and make them pay. The sect leader's voice cut through the room. This is a crucial period for Qingqing. We cannot afford to fall behind. During the war against the Celestial Demon Union, many sects had formed an alliance. When the dust settled, those sects had risen to unprecedented heights. But Qingqing and Amei had been left behind. Reduced to little more than great families of Sichuan, their former glory diminished. Silence fell. All eyes turned to a single truth. To reclaim our honor, the sect leader said, everything depends on Wu Gunsang. He was the son of an elder, the sect's greatest prodigy and their final hope. At that very moment, Wu Gunsang was in isolated training, seeking deeper enlightenment, just as his father had declared. Unaware that death had already arrived at his gate. Wu Gunsang was deep in training. He moved amidst dozens of swords, their blades embedded upright in the ground around him like a silent forest of steel. Each swing of his sword was precise, sharp, and overflowing with talent. Sword intent rippled outward as if the weapons themselves acknowledged him. He was every bit the prodigy the sect boasted of. Elsewhere, the elders continued their discussion. If he is raised properly, one elder said, Wu Gunsang can rival the successors of the three great sects. Another nodded. And there is also the matter of his marriage, to the youngest disciple of the Amei abbess. The room grew quiet. She is beautiful, exceptionally talented in martial arts and politically, a perfect match, an elder said. On the surface. Yet doubt lingered. The eldest among them spoke slowly. The abbess of Amei is dangerous. Her ambition knows no limits. If we bind ourselves to her sect too tightly, we may end up being devoured instead of strengthened. That was why the marriage proposal had been rejected again and again. But reality was cruel. In Sichuan we cannot afford another enemy, someone muttered. Silence followed. At last the sect leader spoke. All our hopes rest on Wu Gunsang. The rise of Qingqing depends on him alone. Disguised as a disciple, Pyo Wol lingered near Wu Gunsang's residence, quietly gathering information. Nearby, two disciples whispered among themselves. I heard he brought women into the sword training hall again, one said with a snort. Keep your voice down, the other warned. But the first didn't stop. He always uses secluded training as an excuse. What kind of seclusion needs company? Pyo Wol listened in silence. People are the same everywhere, he thought. No matter the sect, no matter the banner. Night fell. The Qingqing sect sank into stillness. That was when Pyo Wol began his mission. He slipped through shadows and barriers, infiltrating Wu Gunsang's residence without alerting a single guard. After searching briefly, only one place made sense. The sword training hall. From a vent in the ceiling, Pyo Wol looked down. Wu Gunsang lay asleep beside a woman, discarded robes strewn carelessly across the floor. Even at rest, his presence was overwhelming, his energy dense and refined. Pyo Wol's eyes narrowed. He's stronger than the Blood Shadow captain. But still, he's human. Silently, Pyo Wol drew out a silk thread, thin as a whisper of death, and lowered it toward Wu Gunsang's neck. At that instant, Wu Gunsang's eyes snapped open. A violent surge of inner energy exploded outward. Pyo Wol reacted instantly, yanking the thread tight and lifting Wu Gunsang into the air. But before the assassination could be completed, Wu Gunsang slashed with his hand, his condensed energy cutting the silk thread apart. He landed lightly on the floor. The woman screamed and fled. Now the two stood facing each other. Wu Gunsang calmly slipped on his robe, his expression unreadable. Who are you? He asked. Pyo Wol did not answer. Instead, he drew his blades and lunged forward. Wu Gunsang raised two fingers. Clang. The strike was stopped effortlessly. A shockwave blasted Pyo Wol backward, sending him crashing into a pillar. Before he could recover, Wu Gunsang advanced. His fingers extended, his energy forming a massive invisible sword that crashed down upon him. Pyo Wol blocked, but it wasn't enough. He was being overpowered. In desperation, Pyo Wol hurled a blade straight at Wu Gunsang's face. Wu Gunsang caught it barehanded. A faint smile appeared on his lips. "You're skilled," he said. "Impressive, for an assassin." His gaze sharpened. "Who sent you?" Silence. After a moment, Wu Gunsang sneered. "Did that bitch's father finally lose patience and send you?" Pyo Wol's mind paused. What is he talking about? Wu Gunsang had always been a genius. From a young age, his talent in martial arts was unrivaled. Elders praised him endlessly, disciples admired him, and expectations piled upon his shoulders. Somewhere along the way, that praise twisted into arrogance, and arrogance into desire. He began indulging himself, believing that nothing and no one could touch him. Then came the mistake. One night, he crossed a line with the daughter of an elder. The truth was buried, silenced by status and fear, but the girl could not bear the weight of it. She took her own life. Since that day, Wu Gunsang had lived with a single certainty. Someone would come for him. That was why he believed the assassin before him had been sent by the girl's father. Pyo Wol, however, had no idea what he was talking about. The fight intensified. Wu Gunsang moved like a living sword, each step radiating overwhelming power. His strikes were heavy, refined, absolute. Pyo Wol could do little more than barely defend himself, his arms screaming in pain with every clash. He used every trick he knew, feints, poison needles, hidden blades. None of it worked. Creating distance, Pyo Wol swept his arm outward. Every sword embedded in the training hall rose and flew toward Wu Gunsang like a storm. One by one, they were blocked. Effortlessly. Still, Pyo Wol attacked. That was when Wu Gunsang unleashed his special technique. The sword strike came like an ocean wave, vast and crushing. Pyo Wol ducked behind the woman's discarded form for cover, but it meant nothing. The energy tore past him regardless. He dodged by instinct alone. Then, a memory surfaced. Training days. Cold stone floors. Blood-soaked hands. The moment he had learned the three martial techniques, not to win, but to survive. Pyo Wol tightened his grip on his sword. This time, he did not dodge. He blocked. Steel met energy. The wave split. Wu Gunsang's eyes widened. How? That was Qingqing's secret sword technique. Irritation turned into fury. Wu Gunsang slashed wildly now, abandoning elegance for brute force. But Pyo Wol understood something he did not. He had learned this sword with death at his back. Each counter was precise. Each movement calculated. Pyo Wol waited. And when the opening appeared, he stepped in. The blade pierced straight through Wu Gunsang's chest. The prodigy froze. Blood spilled. The overwhelming presence vanished. Wu Gunsang collapsed lifeless. Pyo Wol stood still, breathing heavily. The mission was complete. But outside, the sect slept peacefully, unaware that their pillar had fallen. What followed would not be silence. It would be chaos. Morning broke over the Qingqing sect. And with it came chaos. Disciples sealed the gates, patrols doubled, and alarm bells echoed across the mountain. At the heart of it all lay a single truth. Wu Gunsang was dead. His lifeless body rested in the sword training hall, cold and unmoving. Beside it, his father collapsed, clutching the corpse, crying and screaming as though his voice alone could pull his son back from death. My son, my son." The elders stood frozen in shock. Who could have done this? Who would dare kill the pillar of Qingqing? Anger soon replaced disbelief. Then, someone noticed the girl, the only witness present when the incident occurred. Whispers spread. The junior brother of the sect leader spoke first, his voice low and sharp. "She knows too much. If she speaks, it will stain not only Wu Gunsang's name but ours as well. Silence her." The room erupted. "That is unacceptable," one elder snapped. "We are a righteous sect. We do not commit such vile acts." Others agreed, denouncing the suggestion. To kill a witness would be to admit guilt, something none of them were willing to do. Then, a figure rose. Wu Gunsang's father stood up slowly, his hands trembling as he gripped his blade. His eyes were hollow, drowned in grief and madness. He walked toward the girl. His voice cracked. Why didn't you protect my son? Why do you get to live, when he doesn't?" The girl pleaded to spare her, but he didn't listen, neither the other elders. Before anyone could move, the blade flashed. The girl fell. Blood stained the stone floor. The hall fell into dead silence. The elder dropped his sword and collapsed to his knees, screaming into the empty air. "I don't know what to do anymore. He was my whole life, my everything." No one stopped him. No one spoke. The sect leader and the elders stood in silence, their faces rigid. Not out of righteousness, but because they knew. The truth had been buried. and the price had already been paid. The news of Wu Gunsang's assassination soon reached the Amei sect. Inside her hall, the old hag erupted in fury. Her carefully laid plan, to devour the Qingqing sect through marriage, had been completely ruined. The alliance she sought, the control she intended to seize, all of it had vanished overnight. She roared, her killing intent shaking the room. "Send disciples immediately," she ordered coldly. "Join the Qingqing sect and hunt down the assassin. I want no trace, no evidence, of our involvement to ever surface." Then she turned to her youngest disciple. "You should be relieved," she said mockingly. "At least you won't have to suffer through that marriage now." The girl lowered her gaze. "I am only sad," she replied softly, "that my husband is dead." The old hag scoffed. "Foolish sentiment." Without another glance, she turned and left. The scene shifted. A vast agricultural field, stretching endlessly under the morning sun. Farmers worked silently, cutting weeds and tilling the soil. Along the dirt road walked a man, singing quietly, a sickle resting on his shoulder. Guards stopped him. "Who are you?" the captain demanded. The man smiled calmly. "I've just finished clearing weeds. I'm heading home." The captain studied him, then gestured for his men to let him pass. But as the man walked away, the captain's eyes narrowed. The sickle. Too clean. He raised his hand sharply. "Stop him." At once the guards moved. The captain fired a flare into the sky, its signal bursting into light. "We found the assassin." The man's smile faded. The disguise had failed. Surrounded, weapons drawn, Pyo Wol stood still for a breath. Then his eyes hardened. If escape was no longer possible, he would carve his way out. The hunt had begun. Pyo Wol's mask fell away, and his features returned to normal. The moment his true face was revealed, the guards attacked. They never stood a chance. Steel flashed. Bodies fell. When it was over, only the captain of the guards remained, suspended helplessly, thin strings biting into his neck. "Who sent you?" Pyo Wol asked coldly. Fear broke the man. The abbess," he gasped. Pyo Wol's eyes darkened. "Who?" "The leader of the Amei sect." Piece by piece the truth surfaced. Amei and Qingqing had always been like cats and dogs, bound by convenience but filled with mutual distrust. The assassination request, the cover-up, the sudden hunt, it all pointed to one source. The old hag of Amei. Rage surged through Pyo Wol. "Even if I die," he vowed quietly, "I'll drag her to hell with me." Reinforcements arrived moments later. Pyo Wol cut through them without hesitation and vanished into the wilderness. Inside a command tent, a monk knelt before Zhonghua, the abbess's head disciple. "The assassin has escaped the inescapable heaven net." Zhonghua slammed her hand down, furious. "How is a mere assassin delaying us this long?" "Continue the pursuit," she ordered. "No matter the cost." Before the orders could be carried out, the youngest disciple spoke. "He's exhausted," she said calmly. "He'll seek shelter. And the safest place for him is where he was raised." Silence fell. Jianghua's eyes sharpened. "Set the ambush." Pyo Wol ran, blood and exhaustion weighing down his steps. "How are they predicting my path?" Then, his gaze met hers. The youngest disciple stood ahead, calm and unmoving. Understanding struck. Without hesitation, Pyo Wol leapt from the cliff. Pyo Wol staggered forward, his body weighed down by severe injuries, when a massive sword strike tore through the air behind him. The blow narrowly missed, carving a deep scar into the earth. An elder of the Qingqing sect stepped forward, eyes burning with fury. "Capture him alive," the elder commanded. "I want answers." Qingqing disciples moved to surround Pyo Wol. At the same moment, Zhonghua arrived from the opposite side. The instant she saw Pyo Wol, her killing intent surged. Unlike Qingqing, she had no interest in capturing him. She attacked with the intent to kill. Caught between two forces, Pyo Wol pushed his body beyond its limits, dodging blades, slipping through gaps, refusing to slow. At last he plunged into the underground cave. Both sects followed. They halted at the entrance, stunned. The cave was enormous, vast enough to house an entire sect. But what truly shook them lay deeper inside. Buildings, training grounds, layouts identical to Qingqing's sect. The elder burst into laughter, rage twisting his voice. "So this is it." He turned sharply. "Capture him alive at all costs. Whoever is behind this will pay, even if they belong to the 5 great sects." Jianghua's eyes narrowed. She understood instantly. Without a word, she sent a silent order to her disciples. "Kill the assassin the moment you see him. Only the youngest disciple remained calm. This place was not a trap for Pyo Wol. It was his territory. Here, the hunter had become the prey. Searching room by room, the Qingqing elder discovered a hidden scroll, the assassination request itself. His expression darkened as he read it. With a roar, he tore it apart using his inner power. The wall behind it shattered. Beyond it lay a hidden chamber. Venomous snakes writhed across the floor, hissing softly. And at the center, a book. Its title sent a chill through the elder's spine. 9 Demon Style. Shock overtook fury. This, he whispered. The elder froze when he saw the book. 9 Demon School. A name erased from history. Long ago, during the War of Demons and Heavens, the 9 Demon School had been annihilated so completely that only fragments remained in forbidden records. Even among sect elders, little was truly known, only that its disciples practiced techniques too cruel, too efficient, and too terrifying to be allowed to exist. Yet here it was. The elder's expression darkened. So the roots lead this far back. Meanwhile, deeper within the cave, darkness swallowed sound. Qingqing and Amei disciples spread out, moving cautiously, their breathing uneven. Torches flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the stone walls. Then, a scream cut short. Silence followed. One by one, the disciples vanished. They never saw him clearly. Only threads, thin, almost invisible, glinting for a fraction of a second before tightening. Bodies were pulled into the darkness, struggles ending without a chance to resist. Panic spread. Formation broke. Whispers turned into sobs. "This isn't a man," someone muttered. "It's a ghost." Faces twisted in pure horror as they realized the truth. They were not hunting an assassin. They were being hunted. Pyo Wol moved like a shadow born of the cave itself. His strings danced silently, claiming lives with ruthless precision. No wasted movement. No mercy. In that underground domain, the disciples were no longer warriors. They were sheep. And the darkness belonged to him. The head disciple crouched low, scanning the ground for footprints. Nothing. The stone floor was pristine, too pristine. A chill crept up his spine. Then, click. His foot pressed down on something unnatural. "Dodge," he shouted. Too late. A sharp whistle cut through the air. From hidden slits in the cave walls, a rain of arrows burst forth, plunging into the formation. Chaos erupted. Some disciples were struck and fell back injured, others barely managing to shield themselves in time. Cries echoed through the cavern. The head disciple gritted his teeth and raised his weapon, forcing himself to stay calm. "This cave is filled with traps," he barked. "Move carefully, watch every step." Sweat trickled down his temple as he slowly lifted his gaze upward. The ceiling. Dark, uneven, riddled with shadows. His heart sank. "This place," he murmured, dread seeping into his voice. High above them, hidden among jagged rock formations, Pyo Wol watched silently. His breathing was steady. His eyes were cold. From this height, he studied their movements, counted their numbers, noted their injuries and fear. Every step they took was already anticipated. Every mistake had a price. In this cave, patience was the deadliest weapon. The hunt was far from over. The Qingqing sect elder was still studying the Book of the 9 Demon School, a forbidden tome filled with knowledge of poison and sorcery. Around him, snakes gathered, specimens for future research. He decided he would examine the book more thoroughly once he returned to the sect. Meanwhile, the various squads of both sects were utterly annihilated by Pyo Wol. Despair spread across the disciples' faces. In the suffocating darkness, panic threatened to consume them. The Amei sect elder raised her voice, steady and commanding, calming her disciples. "Do not panic," she said. "He is injured. Time is on our side. Stay together, do not scatter." But Pyo Wol knew better. He was at a disadvantage. Moving like a shadow, he rushed through the darkness, his target clear, the Amei elder. Just as he was about to strike, she turned sharply, sensing him at the last instant. Her whisk lashed out, colliding with him in a violent clash. In that brief moment, Pyo Wol seized his chance. Ignoring the blow meant for him, he struck her eye. A scream echoed through the cave as blood spilled. One of her eyes was gone. "Damn you," she cursed. Before he could retreat, a blade pierced him from behind. It was the youngest disciple of the Amei sect. "I was lucky," she said, her voice trembling yet resolute. "In the darkness, I trusted my senses." She tightened her grip on the sword and asked, "Why didn't you surrender?" "Surrender?" Pyo Wol laughed hoarsely. With a twist of his wrist, thin strings wrapped around her arm, forcing her blade away. He wrenched himself free and leaped back, creating distance between them. "If I surrender," he asked with a smirk, "will you spare me?" She hesitated. Pyo Wol chuckled. "I knew it. You're not here to capture me, you're here to erase every piece of evidence." Her eyes sharpened. "How much do you know?" His expression twisted with rage. "Everything is connected to the abyss of the 9 calamities," he spat. "The leader of the Ame sect. She's a demon, scum unfit to walk this earth." The injured elder screamed, blood streaming from her ruined eye. Seol ran. "Stop listening to him, kill that villain immediately." Seol ran clenched her jaw. "I may not respect my master," she said coldly, "but I will avenge my fiancé." She charged. Facing her head-on was suicide. Pyo Wol knew that. Suddenly, a violent surge of energy blasted into him from the side. His body slammed into the cave wall with bone-crushing force. Blood spilled from his mouth as he collapsed. The Ame disciples froze. The Qingqing sect elder stepped forward, sword gleaming in his hand. Pyo Wol was still alive, but barely. The Ame elder rushed to finish him off, but the Qingqing elder raised his hand. "Step back." He approached Pyo Wol, his gaze sharp and menacing. "Why did you kill Wu Gunsang?" "Because he was an assassin," Pyo Wol replied simply. The elder frowned. "Does even an assassin not know right from wrong?" Pyo Wol laughed bitterly. "I was kidnapped at 14. I never had the luxury of choosing right or wrong. I had no choice." His laughter echoed, hollow and broken. The elder saw it then, pure malice. And beneath it, wasted potential. Had he been raised properly, he would have been a magnificent talent. Pulling out a request letter, the elder asked, "Do you know who commissioned this?" Pyo Wol smirked. "I have a good guess." He smiled wider. "I even stopped them from killing me, because I'm thinking of the same person." Silence fell over the cave. Pyo Wol burst into hysterical laughter. Cold sweat drenched the Ame elder. She foresaw what was coming. Their secret had been exposed. The Qingqing elder straightened. "A quick death would be too merciful for you." He grabbed Pyo Wol by the feet and began dragging him deeper into the cave. Pyo Wol's body was torn and mangled, yet his laughter never stopped. "This is atonement," the elder said coldly, "for all the lives you've taken." Atonement? Pyo Wol's mind drifted. 7 years of hell. A stolen childhood. A life violated and shattered in their shadows. Who will atone for that? Who will compensate me? Dragged into the darkness, he laughed, not at them but at the cruelty of his own fate. The elder dragged Pyo Wol into the very cave where he had earlier discovered the forbidden book, its depths crawling with poisonous snakes, their cold bodies coiling over one another in endless motion. He stopped. Turning back, he looked down at Pyo Wol and asked coldly, "Do you have no intention of atoning for your sins?" Pyo Wol answered with laughter. Broken, hoarse, unrepentant. The elder's expression hardened. That laughter was his answer. "You have no right to live in the same world as us," the elder declared. "Die a painful death while atoning for your sins here." With those final words, he hurled Pyo Wol into the ditch below. Pyo Wol's body crashed down, his vision blurring as unbearable agony flooded him. Thousands of snakes writhed beneath him, their fangs sinking into his flesh again and again. Venom surged through his veins, burning him from the inside out. Every breath felt like fire tearing through his lungs. Above, the elder turned away. "Seal this cave," he ordered his disciples. "Let it never be used again." Then they left. The cave fell silent, except for the sound of hissing. Pyo Wol lay there, his body broken, strength nearly gone. The snakes continued to bite him relentlessly, as though tearing apart his existence piece by piece. His consciousness flickered, hovering on the edge of death. So this is how it ends, he thought. Then his jaw clenched. Did they really believe they could dispose of him with starving snakes? A twisted grin crept across his face. Summoning the last shred of strength left in his body, Pyo Wol reached out and seized a snake. Ignoring the pain, he sank his teeth into it, biting, tearing, devouring it whole. Venom and blood mixed in his mouth. The snakes recoiled. Then he grabbed another. And another. He ate them. One by one, he consumed the very creatures meant to kill him. Poison burned through him, destroying and reshaping his body simultaneously. His flesh screamed, his bones ached, yet his will refused to break. Hours passed. Then days. Eventually, the cave went completely silent. The ditch that once teemed with thousands of vicious snakes was empty. At its center sat Pyo Wol. His hair had turned long and white, cascading down his back. His body had changed, hardened, tempered, reborn through poison and agony. Slowly he stood up. His eyes were calm. "Cool. This isn't atonement," he murmured. "It's the beginning." Stepping out of the pit, Pyo Wol knew one thing with absolute certainty. It was time to begin his journey of revenge. The scene shifted to a bustling marketplace, alive with noise and movement. Suddenly, a body came crashing down from the top floor of a brothel, smashing into the street below. The crowd scattered in panic as the man groaned, barely conscious. Standing above, on the railing of the Sapphire House, was a handsome young man with long white hair flowing down his back. His body was slender, almost fragile in appearance, yet his deep red eyes radiated something cold and terrifying. It was Pyo Wol. He looked down indifferently and spoke, his voice calm but absolute. "Do not disturb me. I will only stay here for 3 days." Inside, Pyo Wol faced the head madam of the brothel. She stood surrounded by her bodyguards, her composure wavering as she took in the man before her. The guards were still reeling from the display of strength they had just witnessed. One of them snapped angrily, "You won't be safe if you lay a hand on the martial artists of the Sapphire House." Pyo Wol tilted his head slightly. His fingers rolled casually. Thin, invisible strings flickered into existence. "Sapphire House?" he said flatly. "Never heard of it." In the next instant, the strings tightened around the guards' necks. They collapsed to the floor, bodies convulsing, white foam spilling from their mouths. Death hovered just a breath away. The madam froze. With nothing more than a flick of his wrist, he had subdued them. This man was no ordinary guest. Trembling, she dropped to her knees. "This one failed to recognize a master," she pleaded. "Please forgive them. I will compensate you however you wish." Pyo Wol's red eyes shifted to her. The madam felt as though she were staring into the gaze of an enormous serpent hidden deep within a rainforest, silent, patient, and lethal. Slowly, Pyo Wol raised 3 fingers. 3 days, he said. "No one disturbs me." The strings loosened and vanished. The guards fell limp, gasping for air. The madam bowed deeply. "Understood." Gathering her courage, she asked carefully, "May I know this master's name?" "Pyo Wol." Nothing more. A name that should have belonged to the dead. 3 days later, Pyo Wol emerged, now properly dressed, ready to leave. The madam personally offered him food for his journey. He accepted nothing, leaving without a word. After he disappeared into the crowd, the madam turned to the girl who had attended him. "Who was he?" she asked. The girl lowered her head. "Just a guest who stayed for 3 days." The madam exhaled slowly, her hands still trembling. "To think I couldn't recognize the grim reaper standing before me." She looked toward the road he had taken. "A new star of death has appeared in the Jianghu." Heavy rain poured from the sky, drenching the mountains in a relentless downpour. Pyo Wol sat on the window frame of an abandoned house, gazing out at the blurred world beyond the rain. 7 years had passed since that incident. The memories clung to him like scars that refused to fade. To move forward, I must break free from the past. His crimson eyes hardened. The Ame sect. The Qingqing sect. They would pay for what they had done. To gather information, he was heading toward Qingdu. Suddenly, hurried footsteps approached. 3 figures emerged through the rain, a woman, a man, and a monk, rushing toward the abandoned house in search of shelter. As soon as they entered, the sound of rain was joined by loud bickering. "If you hadn't insisted on taking that path, we wouldn't be lost," the woman snapped. The man scoffed. "Hey, because of me we met someone interesting, didn't we?" "Shut up," she shouted. In the midst of their argument, the woman noticed Pyo Wol sitting silently by the window. Her eyes widened slightly. She approached him with an easy smile, while the monk clasped his hands together and bowed politely. "Greetings," the monk said calmly. The woman tilted her head, her tone suddenly playful. "You're quite handsome to be living alone in these mountains. Fancy meeting someone like you out here." The man beside her grinned. "See? If it weren't for me getting us lost, we wouldn't have met him." She turned and smacked his arm. "I said shut up." Clearing her throat, she turned back to Pyo Wol, her tone now polite. "Forgive us. Let me introduce ourselves. My name is Hyo Runju." Pyo Wol nodded slightly. "Pyo Wol." The monk and the man followed with their own introductions. Runju glanced at him with curiosity. "Where are you heading?" "Qingdu." Her eyes lit up. "That's our destination too. Would you mind traveling together?" Pyo Wol studied them quietly. 3 people, each utterly different. A flirtatious woman, a loud man, and a calm monk. Yet they traveled together as if bound by something unseen. Who is the center that holds this group together? The thought intrigued him. After a brief pause, Pyo Wol nodded. "Very well." A large cargo ship was being loaded along the riverbank, crates and sacks stacked high as laborers shouted over one another. Before long, the vessel was ready to depart. Pyo Wol and the three companions had managed to secure passage aboard the ship. As the boat drifted away from the shore, Hyo Runju leaned against the railing and glanced at Pyo Wol. "So," she asked casually, "what brings you to Chengdu?" Pyo Wol's gaze remained on the flowing river. "I'm meeting acquaintances," he replied. After a brief pause he added, "You could also call them debtors. I'm there to collect what is owed to me." She smiled faintly, sensing there was more behind his words. "And you?" Pyo Wol asked in return. "Why Chengdu?" "We have business," Runju said lightly. "Even if we carry no merchandise." She tapped her temple. "Some things can be sold without being seen." The man beside her raised an eyebrow and turned toward Pyo Wol. "Which clan do you belong to?" "None," Pyo Wol answered. Both men stared at him in surprise. With his appearance and presence, belonging to no clan at all was almost unthinkable in the Jianghu. Later, Pyo Wol sat alone near the side of the ship, quietly observing the crew and the merchants aboard. His eyes missed nothing. Runju approached him again, folding her arms. "You've been staring quite intently," she said. "See something interesting?" "Nothing," Pyo Wol replied. She leaned a little closer, her tone playful, clearly flirting. The monk, watching from a distance, frowned slightly, unease flickering across his calm expression. The man took a long drink from his flask and chuckled. "Don't worry," he said lazily. "She's the blood spider. Every move she makes is calculated." Before the moment could stretch further, a loud crash echoed across the river. Another ship was approaching fast. Shouts rang out. Panic spread among the merchants. "Pirates!" someone screamed. The merchant in charge turned pale, his legs nearly giving out. Before he could collapse, the sly man stepped forward, flashing a grin. "Need help?" he asked, rubbing his fingers together in the unmistakable sign of money. Before the merchant could even answer, a blur shot forward. The monk had already leapt onto the pirate's ship. In mere moments, screams rang out, followed by silence. Bodies dropped, and the pirates were utterly defeated. The monk returned as calmly as he had left, robes barely disturbed. The merchant stood frozen, mouth agape. The sly man chuckled and leaned closer. "Did you see that?" he said. "Now, let's talk about the price." Only then did the merchant truly understand. These were not ordinary travelers. They were mercenaries, soldiers for hire. And Pyo Wol, watching silently from the side of the ship, finally began to understand the group he had joined. After finishing off the pirates, the monk returned calmly to the cargo ship, his robes barely damp. The sly man was already collecting his payment from the shaken merchant, counting the coins with practiced ease. The monk glanced around and frowned. "Next time," he said evenly, "tell that woman to handle such matters." "She wasn't there," the sly man replied with a shrug. At the other end of the ship, Hyo Runju was still busy. She leaned close to Pyo Wol, her movements deliberate, her voice soft as she made one advance after another. "Why don't you stay with us when we reach Chengdu?" she asked with a smile. "Traveling alone gets lonely." "No," Pyo Wol replied coldly. Not a single crack appeared in his expression. None of her charms worked. The sly man watched from afar, eyes narrowing slightly. In a pirate attack, most people panic, he thought. But this man didn't even blink. Those eyes, deep red and still, were not ordinary. Frustrated, Runju finally gave up on subtlety. She huffed and began acting coy, raising her voice just enough to draw attention. "I can't believe this," she said dramatically. "A girl shows interest and you reject her so easily?" Pyo Wol turned to her at last. "I'm not interested in poisonous roses," he said flatly. "No matter how beautiful they are." For a brief instant, the smile on Runju's face cracked. Just slightly. Then she laughed again, smoothly covering it up. "So you admit I'm beautiful?" Pyo Wol didn't answer. He only observed her, quietly, carefully. By now he had reached a conclusion. These people were vagabonds, mercenaries drifting where the wind carried them. And yet, they were heading to Chengdu at the same time as him. What's happening there? He wondered. That even people like them are being drawn in. The Ame sect. The Qingqing sect. Their circumstances were far from good. Memories from 7 years ago surfaced in his mind. The cave, the snakes, the betrayal. A cold smile curved across Pyo Wol's lips. So that's how it began. The river continued to flow, unaware that beneath its calm surface, a storm was already gathering in Chengdu. They reached their destination and disembarked from the cargo ship. From there, Chengdu could only be reached by horseback. The vagabonds prepared to leave first. Hyo Runju glanced back at Pyo Wol once more. "Come with us," she said, half teasing, half serious. Pyo Wol shook his head. "I'll stay here for a while. We'll meet again in Chengdu." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, then she smiled. "Very well." They mounted their horses and rode off, disappearing down the road. Pyo Wol turned and entered a nearby inn, intending to eat and rest for the night. The moment he stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every man in the inn stared at him, at his long white hair, slender frame, and crimson eyes. Whispers spread quickly. Pyo Wol sat down and ordered food. Just as he lifted his chopsticks, a bulky man slammed his hand onto the table, making the dishes rattle. "Oi," the man sneered. "Are you a dude, or a girl?" Pyo Wol raised his eyes slowly, his gaze cold and indifferent. The man laughed loudly. "Name's Hujan. We made a bet, whether you're a cross-dressing woman." "You lost," Pyo Wol replied calmly. Hujan's smile turned ugly. "Then I'll just check for myself." The inn erupted with laughter and cheers. "Strip him." "Let's see." Hujan lunged forward. A sharp whistle cut through the air. A chopstick pierced straight into his eye. Blood burst out as Hujan screamed, clutching his face and collapsing to the floor. Pyo Wol stood up. Horror replaced amusement on every face in the inn. He walked toward the writhing man and spoke softly, his voice carrying clearly through the silence. "I told you to keep your distance." Another chopstick flashed. Hujan's second scream was shorter. His other eye was gone. The inn exploded into rage. Chairs scraped, blades were drawn, and men rushed toward Pyo Wol from all sides. He didn't move back. He simply raised his hands. Chopsticks spread between his fingers, like claws. In the blink of an eye, bodies fell. Cries were cut short. Limbs went limp. Blood splattered the wooden floor. It was over almost instantly. Silence returned to the inn. Only broken tables, fallen men, and the steady sound of Pyo Wol's breathing remained. He stood alone amid the carnage, calm, untouched. The world around him finally understood one thing. They had provoked something they should never have approached. The market in Chengdu was bustling with people. Everyone was busy with their work, and the three mercenaries wandered through the crowded streets. The slime man noticed that nearly half of the people roaming the market were carrying weapons. Seeing this, Hyo Ranju looked delighted. It was the perfect environment for people like them. The monk, however, frowned. What brings fortune to one brings misfortune to another. What could be more tragic than that? The girls snapped at him to shut up, pointing out that he was the one most obsessed with money. Soon they arrived at the inn they were heading toward and entered. They were expecting someone there, and he was indeed waiting for them. The girl leaped onto his shoulder in excitement, and the man laughed as he steadied her. He was Zhang Muriang, the leader of the mercenary group known as Black Cloud's Corpse. The other two greeted him respectfully, and he returned their greetings. The group gathered to discuss their future. The slime man hesitantly asked whether they were really going to meddle in this affair. Zhang Muriang coldly replied that if he did not want to be involved, he should leave immediately. Startled, the slime man quickly backtracked, insisting he had no intention of backing out. The girl remarked that the issue involved the Qin Chin sect and the Amei sect. Everyone in Sichuan knew of their conflict, which had lasted for 7 years and reached a breaking point. No one knew the reason for their feud, but their constant clashes had split Jianghu throughout Sichuan. A massive battle seemed inevitable. Zhang Muriang said the reason did not matter. What mattered was that an opportunity had finally arrived, one that could allow them to fulfill their long-held dream. Meanwhile, Pyo Wol descended the stairs of the inn after the incident the previous night. The server stared at him in shock, only now realizing that such ruthless brutality had been hidden behind his beautiful appearance. He quietly warned him to leave as soon as possible. Pyo Wol asked the innkeeper if there was anyone who understood Sichuan's internal affairs best. When the innkeeper seemed confused, Pyo Wol clarified that he was asking about the conflicts between the sections. The innkeeper suggested that he visit Workshop Street, saying that at the very end of the street there was a place called the Fire Dragon Room, a sect formed long ago by Sichuan's master artisans. Workshop Street was loud and chaotic, filled with the ringing of hammers and the clanging of metal. Weapons lined the stalls and sparks flew through the air. Pyo Wol entered one of the workshops and saw a young man hammering a blade, the sound of metal clear and focused. Suddenly, a furious shout echoed through the room. A large man struck the young man on the head and cursed him loudly, demanding to know who had given him permission to use a hammer. He berated the youth, ordering him to return to doing chores and forbidding him from touching a hammer again until he was told otherwise. Humiliated, the young man stumbled away. The man then noticed Pyo Wol and demanded to know why he was there and what he wished to purchase. Pyo Wol asked what the young man had done wrong. The craftsman explained that his name was Tang Sochu and that he was rumored to be a descendant of the Tang clan, yet he kept trying to use a hammer without permission. Pyo Wol asked why descendants of the Tang clan were not allowed to use hammers. The craftsman scoffed, realizing Pyo Wol must be new to Sichuan. He explained that the Tang clan had fallen into ruin during the war with the demons after siding with a demon-cursed faction. As punishment, they were wiped out by someone known as the strongest in history. Since then, the Tang clan had been regarded as traitors, and no workshop dared to pass down secret techniques to anyone bearing their blood, fearing history would repeat itself. Pyo Wol remarked that descendants were paying for the sins of their ancestors. The craftsman coldly replied that the Tang clan had brought ruin upon themselves. When asked what he wished to buy, Pyo Wol answered that he was looking for a flying sword. The craftsman led him to the weapons displayed in the back. Pyo Wol noticed the unusually high volume of orders and asked about it. The craftsman confirmed that since the Amei and Qingqing sect had begun fighting in full force, weapon orders had doubled. Though chaos had spread throughout Sichuan, business was booming. As Pyo Wol turned back, he saw Tang Sochu being bullied again, other artisans mocking him for daring to touch a hammer. A blade slipped and fell dangerously close to the young man's face. Before anyone could react, Pyo Wol stepped forward. He said calmly that humans were far more atrocious than beasts. The moment a person allowed themselves to be seen as worthless, they would be torn apart until nothing remained. If one made endurance a habit, they would be forced to live forever as something lowly. Standing face to face with Tang Sochu, Pyo Wol gave him a choice. How would he live? Pyo Wol told him that if he made endurance a habit, he would have to keep living like a lowly dog. The other men shouted at him, demanding to know who he was to meddle in their affairs, but Pyo Wol paid them no attention. His gaze remained fixed on Tang Sochu. How will you live? He asked again. Angered by being ignored, one of the men lunged toward Pyo Wol. At that moment, Tang Sochu suddenly pounced, sinking his teeth into the man's neck and pressing a dagger toward his eyes. The others erupted in curses, yelling that Tang Sochu was nothing but a beast. Tang Sochu glared at them coldly. "When did you ever treat me like a person?" he said, tightening his grip. The man he had bitten went limp, fainting from shock. The others screamed that Tang Sochu would not get away with this, but he no longer cared. He was tired of being beaten and humiliated. He warned them that he would slit the throat of the next person who dared to touch him. Dragging their unconscious companion, they retreated, hurling curses as they left. Once they were gone, Tang Sochu collapsed from exhaustion. Pyo Wol carried him back to his home, a shabby hut with almost nothing inside. Pyo Wol remarked that it was a nice place. Tang Sochu thought he was being mocked, but Pyo Wol was sincere. Compared to the cave where he had once lived among poisonous snakes, this hut felt peaceful. Tang Sochu assumed Pyo Wol was only saying that to console him. Pyo Wol soon said that he had somewhere to go and began to leave. Tang Sochu asked where he was headed. Pyo Wol replied dryly, asking whether Tang Sochu usually involved himself in other people's affairs. Pulling his hair back with a smirk, Tang Sochu shot back that Pyo Wol had done the same. Pyo Wol paused, then agreed. He said there were people who owed him, people who had used him, abandoned him, and hunted him. Tang Sochu asked if he was seeking revenge and who those people were. After a brief silence, Pyo Wol answered that it was the Qingqing sect, the Amei sect, and all those who supported them. Tang Sochu was shocked. He shouted that Pyo Wol had gone insane, that he was trying to wage war against the entire force of Sichuan by himself. Pyo Wol calmly replied that he might indeed be insane, then asked Tang Sochu to return the dagger he had lent him earlier. Tang Sochu looked at the weapon and scoffed, saying it was nothing but garbage. Pyo Wol was surprised. It was worth at least a tael of silver. Tang Sochu reached under his bed and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He handed Pyo Wol a set of flying daggers. They were perfectly balanced, flawless in craftsmanship. Pyo Wol asked if he had made them himself, noting how difficult it must have been. Tang Sochu replied proudly that he had made them quickly and in secret, and that it hadn't been difficult at all. Pyo Wol asked if he was truly fine with giving them away. Tang Sochu answered that they shared a common enemy. Both the Qingqing and Amei sects were responsible for the downfall of the already weakened Tang clan. They had oppressed and isolated it until nothing remained. Pyo Wol was the first person who had ever told him not to endure it, so giving him the daggers was no problem at all. Pyo Wol closed his eyes and bowed slightly in silence. Then he tested the daggers. As he moved, they glowed faintly, dancing across his palms. They flowed as freely as the wind beneath his fingers. He named them Phantom Daggers. Then Pyo Wol introduced himself properly, telling Tang Sochu to remember his name, because whenever it was spoken, these daggers would follow. Tang Sochu greeted him in return, wishing him renown across Sichuan. The scene then shifted to a busy inn in Chengdu, where a beautiful young woman sat drinking tea alongside others her age. They addressed her respectfully as Lady Wu. She belonged to the 100 Flower Room sect. With a soft sigh, she told the men that her sect's circumstances were not good due to the increasing pressure from the Qingqing sect. Still, she said she was relieved that everyone was doing their best and thanked them sincerely. Her words stirred the men's hearts. Enchanted by her beauty, they eagerly vowed to protect her sect at all costs. She thanked them again, tears glistening faintly in her eyes. Yet inwardly she sneered, "All men are the same, nothing but vulgar barbarians." She then mentioned that Mount Amei had issued a summons, and that she might not be able to attend the next gathering. The men, ever foolish, immediately asked whether they could join the Amei sect as well. She widened her eyes in feigned surprise, acting as though she was deeply moved that they would go so far for her sake. In truth, she knew they were drawn only by her looks, and she intended to use them however she pleased. Laughing heartily in her mind, she imagined the future, herself standing at the peak as the leader of the Amei sect, ruling over all of Sichuan. Soon after, they rose to leave the inn. At that moment, her gaze met someone unexpected. Pyo Wol sat nearby, calmly eating his dinner. Lady Wu noticed Pyo Wol and found herself drawn to his bright red eyes and fair skin. Curious, she approached him and stopped at his table. With a gentle smile and a sweet expression, she spoke politely, saying that since it was their first meeting, they should introduce themselves. She introduced herself as Wu Sionha of the 100 Flower Room and asked for his name. Pyo Wol, he replied simply. She cheerfully asked whether he was a martial artist. Pyo Wol bluntly told her to think whatever she liked and asked what she wanted. Maintaining her irritatingly sweet tone, she asked if there was a reason he could not answer her properly. Pyo Wol replied coldly, asking whether she always acted so inquisitively when meeting someone for the first time. One of her lackeys suddenly shouted, accusing Pyo Wol of speaking rudely to Lady Wu and demanding an apology. Pyo Wol calmly asked, "For what?" The overzealous man ordered him to kneel and apologize, threatening him if he refused. Pyo Wol asked what would happen if he did not, then stood up, saying there was a limit to how blinded a man should be by a woman and that one should assess their opponent before making threats. Feeling insulted, the man shouted for his sword and charged at Pyo Wol. The onlookers gasped, realizing a fight was about to break out. Pyo Wol dodged every strike effortlessly as if merely taking a leisurely walk. The man roared in rage, channeling all his chi, his eyes glowing as he unleashed his sword techniques, but all of it was in vain. Pyo Wol continued moving forward calmly, evading each attack with ease. Stopping in front of Lady Wu, Pyo Wol glared at her sharply and asked whether this was the best she could do. At that moment, the man was still buzzing behind him, swinging his sword wildly. Pyo Wol caught him by the neck and slammed him into the ground, cracking the floor and burying his face into it. Lady Wu hurriedly asked Pyo Wol to calm his anger, saying that the man was not bad and had only acted aggressively for her sake. Pyo Wol replied that people must take responsibility for their own actions. Lady Wu then said that she would shoulder that responsibility herself. Her lackeys shouted that they would fight to the death for her, proudly displaying her control over them. Pyo Wol observed silently, thinking that she was fully exploiting her beauty and the foolish devotion of low-minded men. She asked Pyo Wol whether he agreed. He smiled faintly. That night, in a bedchamber, Pyo Wol lay beside Lady Wu. He had slept with her. Later, she called out to him and asked him to grant her one request, her true nature finally surfacing. Pyo Wol said he would decide after hearing it. She asked him to kill Nam Hosen, the young leader of the Thunder clan. She explained that her sect leader had proposed a marriage alliance between them, and when they hesitated, the Thunder clan threatened to involve the Qingqing sect. Her sect, she said, was in a difficult position because of him. Pyo Wol replied that once the task was done, she would claim she had no connection to him. She agreed, adding that if he killed Nam Hosen, She would put in a good word for him with her aunt and provide a substantial reward. Pyo Wol asked who her aunt was. She answered that her aunt was one of the great disciples of the Ame sect leader, the abbess of 9 calamities, Pavilion Master Manhwa. Pyo Wol remembered her instantly, the woman whose eye he had taken in the cave. A smirk formed on his lips as he realized what was about to unfold. The scene shifted to Mount Ame where the sect resided. 2 vagabonds from the Black Cloud Corps were climbing the long stone stairs leading to the sect. Soon they stood inside the grand hall before the elders of Mount Ame. At the head sat the sect leader, the abbess of 9 calamities. Beside her stood her eldest disciple, the one-eyed Manhwa, and her youngest disciple, Yong Seo Ran. The abbess spoke first. She stated that a group of vagabonds would never spill blood for free, so they must be seeking compensation. The 2 replied calmly that they indeed wanted something in return. They could not afford to suffer losses. "How much do you want?" she asked. At that moment, Hyo Ranju stepped forward and said they believed 500,000 gold yang would suffice. The amount instantly sparked outrage among the elders. Such a sum was absurd, and some shouted that the discussion should end immediately. The abbess slammed her staff down and ordered them to be silent. Their behavior was unsightly. She then addressed the vagabonds, saying they could not seriously expect her to accept such a demand. With that amount of money she could hire several mercenary groups like them. Hyo Ranju replied calmly that none of those groups would be as strong as the Black Cloud Corps. The abbess smiled faintly and asked what would happen if she refused. Hyo Ranju answered that one of their members should have already arrived at Mount Qingqing, offering them the same proposal. The abbess's smile turned terrifying. She released her overwhelming aura, instantly suppressing both vagabonds. They collapsed to their knees, coughing blood as internal injuries formed. She told them to stop posturing and be honest. Did they truly believe she would pay 500,000 gold yang? She demanded to know their real price. Hyo Ranju, struggling to breathe, realized why the abbess ruled Mount Ame. She then explained that they were vagabonds who sold their strength to the highest bidder. Even a single yang more would decide their allegiance. The abbess understood, they were remaining silent to the bitter end. Their representative at Mount Qingqing would be saying the same thing. Qingqing already held the advantage, but with the Black Cloud Corps, Ame could secure victory. Though she wished to kill them on the spot, the looming conflict meant she needed every capable hand. She lifted a finger, withdrawing her suppression, and ordered her eldest disciple Manhwa to accompany them and finalize the deal. Elsewhere, inside an inn, merchants were storming out in frustration. Doing business with the Thunder Clan had completely drained them. They complained bitterly. 2 large storage rooms were already filled with grain, yet the Thunder Clan still demanded more at dirt-cheap prices. One merchant muttered that perhaps the Thunder Clan had some unresolved hatred toward grain in a past life. Another sighed, saying the rich were always the same. They would sort things out at a nearby inn. Meanwhile, the leader of the Black Cloud Corps, Zhang Muriang, sat yawning over a cup of tea. He wondered how things were unfolding between the Ame and Qingqing sects. They were walking a dangerous tightrope between the two. The sly man approached him and mentioned seeing a familiar face in the market. He spoke of the man they had traveled with earlier, Pyo Wol. The leader frowned. Seeing him again in Sichuan, was that truly a coincidence? The sly man laughed it off, asking why it mattered. But Zhang Muriang felt uneasy. Since becoming entangled between Ame and Qingqing, his instincts had sharpened. Something about Pyo Wol unsettled him. The sly man said that if his instincts were warning him, they should not be ignored. Zhang Muriang decided to send one of their swift members to observe Pyo Wol. He admitted that he was curious as well. Soon after, 2 figures arrived, the emissaries from Mount Ame. Hyo Ranju introduced them and both sides exchanged greetings. Zhang Muriang introduced himself as the leader of the Black Cloud Corps. Smiling, he asked whether the direct arrival of Ame's grand disciples meant the sect was ready to strike a deal. Manhwa replied coldly that it depended on the negotiations. She warned that if the Black Cloud Corps attempted to deceive Ame with mediocre strength, they would pay dearly, even if it meant postponing the war with Qingqing. Zhang Muriang remained unfazed, smiling as he replied that they were fully prepared for that risk. He invited them inside, stating that they would match conditions. When Manhwa heard their demand, she erupted in fury. They were asking for trading rights beyond the Great Wall. She slammed the table, releasing her energy and shattering it into pieces. She shouted that vagabonds should act like vagabonds and be content with scraps. This was pure greed. Zhang Muriang, however, remained composed. He calmly asked whether it was truly unreasonable. After all, if Ame became the ruler of Sichuan, such terms would be entirely possible. Jianghua trembled with rage as the room fell silent, while Zhang Muriang's smile never faded. After a moment of silence, Zhang Muriang spoke again. He said that the Black Cloud Corps would give up both the demand for trading rights and the request for 500,000 gold yang. In exchange, he asked that the Amei sect help them settle near the Western Plateau. The one-eyed Jianghua finally calmed down and asked whether this had been his true aim all along, to secure a place to settle. Zhang Muriang answered honestly. They were a group of vagabonds and no sect wished to have them settle nearby. The Amei sect was no different, Jianghua acknowledged. That was precisely why he proposed the Western Plateau, far from Mount Amei. Smiling faintly, he asked whether she could not allow even that much. Jianghua considered it carefully. In the short term, the Black Cloud Corps was an indispensable force. In the long run, however, they could become a burden. But if used as a meat shield, their numbers would dwindle and little would remain of them. Granting them land far away was not difficult, and if they ever became troublesome, they could simply be disposed of later. After calculating the benefits, she accepted the proposal. Zhang Muriang declared that the negotiations were complete. Internally, he thought that things would never have gone this smoothly if they had been dealing with the Qingqing sect. He asked whether they should draft a contract. Jianghua replied that it was unnecessary. The agreement would be upheld in the name of the Amei sect. Zhang Muriang then asked whether they would return to Mount Amei or stay for a day, offering to prepare rooms for them. Jianghua answered that they would stay at the 100-flower room, as the young master there was her niece. Suddenly, Hyo Ranju rushed in urgently and called out to her superior. Jianghua snapped at her, demanding how she dared barge in so recklessly regardless of urgency. Hyo Ranju quickly reported the news. The young leader of the Thunder clan had been assassinated. Shock rippled through the room. Jianghua was present and heard everything. Hyo Ranju added that the Thunder clan was convinced the culprit was the Qingqing sect. Later that evening, at the gates of the Qingqing sect, the Thunder clan leader arrived with his disciples, all fully armed, bringing a coffin with them. The Qingqing sect leader stepped forward and asked why he had come with a coffin. The Thunder clan leader retorted that he should be the one asking that question. He opened the coffin, revealing the corpse inside, bruised from head to toe. The wounds were unmistakable. They bore the marks of the Qingqing sect's 72 sword waves. The Qingqing sect leader was shocked. It was undeniably their technique. The Thunder clan leader demanded whether they still intended to make excuses. His disciple had clearly died by Qingqing martial arts. The only logical conclusion was that the killer came from the Qingqing sect. He accused Qingqing of acting first after learning that the Thunder clan planned to support the 100-flower room. The Qingqing sect leader tried to calm him down, but the Thunder clan leader shouted that this corpse was proof and demanded an explanation. At that moment, the Qingqing sect leader's junior brother stormed forward in rage, shouting how dare the Thunder clan act so arrogantly at their gates. Declaring it unforgivable, he attacked. The Thunder clan leader attempted to block with his sword, but it was useless. The strike pierced straight into his chest, sending him flying back. He was defeated in a single blow. The junior brother raged that the Thunder clan leader should be executed immediately for his accusations. The sect leader rebuked him, asking why he attacked without orders, but he ignored him, saying that entertaining such people would only make them a laughingstock. The sect leader silently observed, realizing his junior brother had grown far more violent in recent years. Defeated on the ground, the Thunder clan leader asked bitterly whether this was how the Qingqing sect intended to clarify matters, through force. The Qingqing sect leader remained silent. He ordered his men to provide lodging for the Thunder clan and their disciples, then instructed his disciple Chang Yob to go to Chengdu and investigate the matter. Chang Yob accepted and departed at once. That night, inside an inn, people whispered among themselves about Nam Hosen's death. Many believed the Qingqing sect was responsible, arguing that martial traces could not be easily forged. The stronger the technique, the more distinct its signature. Some wondered whether Qingqing truly were the culprits. The murmurs passed by a closed room. Inside, Pyo Wol sat alone, sipping tea quietly, already contemplating his next move. Lady Wu came to him and asked quietly, "How did you do it?" Pyo Wol looked at her calmly. "What are you talking about?" She explained, the death of Nam Hosen, and how the Qingqing sect had been made the culprit. Pyo Wol denied it without hesitation and stood up. Lady Wu pressed on, asking again whether he was the one who killed him. Pyo Wol stepped closer. Lowering his voice, he asked, "Why does it matter who the killer is? What's important is that he's dead." He gently lifted her chin, drawing close to her lips. In a hushed voice she replied, "Yes, you're right." Just as Pyo Wol was about to kiss her, she suddenly stepped back. She told him it would be difficult for them to meet for a while, as an important guest had arrived. Pyo Wol asked who it was. She answered that Zhonghua, the first disciple of the Ame sect, had arrived along with her aunt and her junior sister. Because of her aunt's fussy personality, Lady Wu had to attend to them personally. Pyo Wol asked what Zhonghua was doing in Chengdu. Lady Wu replied that the Ame sect had come to hire a vagabond group called the Black Cloud Corps. She had heard they were among the most powerful of the vagabond groups and that their leader was especially intelligent. Pyo Wol then asked when she would be returning to her sect. She replied that she would be staying at the 100-Flower Room for a while. Saying that she had to take care of her guests, she told him she must leave now and that they would meet again next time. Pyo Wol stood there alone, thinking about Jianghua's junior sister. He recalled the cool-headed and menacing girl he had encountered 7 years ago in the cave. There was a chance he might see her again in Chengdu. He was certain that the Qingqing sect would be in complete turmoil over Nam Hosen's death. For now, it was better to wait and let his plan unfold. Pyo Wol had assassinated Nam Hosen using his flying daggers, brutally killing him while performing the Qingqing sect's secret technique. The next day, Qingqing sect disciples arrived at the site of Nam Hosen's assassination and began their investigation. One of them remarked that although the sword traces were rougher, they were undoubtedly those of the 72 sword waves. The head disciple wondered whether an outsider had somehow learned the technique. Another disciple immediately denied the possibility, stating that it was a secret art known only to a select few, even within their own sect. However, the head disciple reminded him that there had once been a time when a transcript had leaked, containing only the sword movements. The investigator rejected the idea, explaining that without the Qingqing sect's cultivation technique, a single person could not bring out even half of the art's true power. They speculated that perhaps another sect had reverse-engineered the movements and created a compatible cultivation method. With no clear conclusion, they decided the priority was determining how the assassin had infiltrated the area. Standing silently, the head disciple briefly thought of the assassin they had encountered 7 years ago, but dismissed it. That man was surely dead. Later, as they walked through the market toward their lodging, they encountered Zhonghua of the Ame sect and her disciples approaching from the opposite direction. Both sides aggressively unsheathed their swords, glaring at one another as their enmity surfaced openly. The Qingqing sect's head disciple and Zhonghua exchanged sharp verbal insults. Xiao Ran quietly urged her elder sister to withdraw, but Zhonghua snapped at her to be silent. How could they turn their backs on these Qingqing bastards? Zhonghua accused the Qingqing sect of killing the Thunder Clan's young leader while knowing he was to be betrothed to the 100-Flower Room's heir, condemning them for discarding their humanity so easily. The Qingqing disciple retorted that she should shut her mouth, that they had spent 7 long years killing the most promising talent of their sect. Xiao Ran stood behind them, troubled. She wondered where everything had gone wrong. The Ame sect had started it, never knowing the assassin would truly kill Wu Gunsang. That assassin was long dead, yet they were still dancing in his palm. She didn't even know his name. Suddenly realization struck her. She felt a cold gaze upon her and turned around, but no one was there. At that moment, Pyo Wol, dressed in black veiled clothing, walked past them unnoticed, silently observing before disappearing into the crowd. Later, he revealed himself and murmured that her senses were as sharp as ever. He needed only a proper ember to ignite the fire of conflict, but the big players had already gathered. It wasn't a bad start. After all, they were already fighting like cats and dogs in the middle of the market. Later, when night fell, Hyo Ranju was seen questioning Pyo Wol about where he had been the entire time. She said she had been waiting for him. Pyo Wol was slightly surprised. He hadn't expected her to come looking for him. She had arrived with the Sly Man and Zhang Muriang, the captain of the Black Cloud Corps. The 4 of them took their seats together and began dinner, after which they explained why they had come to meet him. Zhang Muriang introduced himself as the captain of the Black Cloud Corps. He told Pyo Wol that he had heard a great deal about him and that fate had brought them together in Chengdu. Since that was the case, they might as well share a meal. Pyo Wol remained silent, merely observing and listening to what he had to say. Zhang Muriang continued, saying that Hyo Ranju had taken a strong interest in him, which was why he had wanted to meet Pyo Wol at least once. Now that he was seeing him in person, he could tell how strong he truly was. He added that Pyo Wol was concealing his intense aura extremely well, drawing attention instead to his flashy appearance. However, such concealment could not fool him. The energy leaking from you, Zhang Muriang said calmly, is already abnormal. Hyo Ranju chimed in, openly praising Pyo Wol. Getting straight to the point, Captain Zhang Muriang asked Pyo Wol if he would be willing to join the Black Cloud Corps. Pyo Wol listened intently without interrupting. The captain continued, explaining that most people saw the Black Cloud Corps as nothing more than a band of vagabonds. However, he had a dream of his own, to have the Black Cloud Corps acknowledged as a legitimate sect. To make that happen, they needed every capable person they could gather. He said that he was willing to offer anything Pyo Wol desired. Then, without hesitation, he offered Hyo Ranju to him. The sly man, who was quietly eating while listening to the conversation, paused in shock. He had already noticed that Hyo Ranju had taken a genuine interest in Pyo Wol. Now that the captain had offered her outright, he wondered what kind of answer Pyo Wol would give. Pyo Wol responded without hesitation. "It's not that attractive an offer." At those words, the sly man spat out his drink. The other three immediately turned their gazes toward him. Flustered, the sly man hurriedly apologized, making an excuse about food being stuck in his throat, and urged them to continue. After a brief silence, the captain spoke again. "What is it you don't like about the offer?" Zhang Muriang asked calmly. "Joining the Black Cloud Corps, or having Ranju?" Pyo Wol replied bluntly. "I'd rather not lay my hands on food that's obviously bound to spoil." The smile vanished from Hyo Ranju's face. For a moment, she simply stared at him, unable to believe she had been rejected so bluntly. An awkward silence settled over the table. Then suddenly Captain Zhang Muriang burst into laughter. "Ah, it was just a joke," he said loudly. "Why are you making such a serious face like an idiot?" He stood up abruptly, smashing his palm against the table. "Hyo Ranju is far too valuable to give up so easily. You have no idea what you're refusing." His tone shifted, growing cold and sharp. "Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't cross paths with the Black Cloud Corps. I enjoy talking things out, but the others prefer action first." Pyo Wol looked at him calmly and replied, "Then let me say this as well. If you suddenly find yourself beheaded while walking down the road one day, you can think of it as my doing." His voice was utterly serious. Zhang Muriang fell silent, glaring at Pyo Wol. Then Pyo Wol laughed lightly and said, "It's just a joke. Why are you making such a serious face like an idiot?" The captain remained standing, speechless. With that, the dinner came to an end. The scene shifted to the Golden Heaven clan, where the disciples of the Qingqing sect were staying. The investigator greeted his senior brother and reported on the Amei sect's movements. They had not taken a single step outside the 100-flower room. He had dispatched several disciples around the area as a precaution. The head disciple nodded grimly. He was determined to track down the scoundrel who had killed the young leader of the Thunder clan as soon as possible, so proper countermeasures could be taken before the situation escalated. The investigator agreed. That was precisely why they had contacted the Hao clan. Their information network spread across Sichuan like a spider's web, especially through the backwaters and hidden routes. If anyone knew who had approached the Thunder clan that day, it would be them. After reporting, the investigator took his leave. Left alone, the head disciple frowned. More sects were becoming involved than he had expected. If the assassin was not caught quickly, the situation could spiral out of control. Elsewhere in the dead of night, a man pressed his ear against the wall of an inn. He was certain the target was inside, yet he could not sense even the faintest presence. Not a breath, not a shift in air. He was spying on Pyo Wol. He knew Pyo Wol was extraordinary, but this level of concealment was deeply unsettling. The man gave a subtle signal to his fellow members stationed on the terrace of the opposite building. One of them departed immediately to report to the vice captain of the Black Cloud Corps. Later, he returned and reported that there had been no movement throughout the night. The vice captain ordered them to continue surveillance. The captain was deeply bothered by Pyo Wol's presence. The spy resumed his work, studying a map spread before him. His gaze lingered on the gates of Mount Qingqing. Fighting there would be disadvantageous. The terrain was ill-suited for horses. If possible, they needed to draw their enemies down to the foot of the mountain, where their 200 horses could be used effectively. Suddenly he felt a chilling gaze. Instinctively, he hurled several daggers into the ceiling. Nothing. No presence. No sound. He frowned, convincing himself that he was being overly sensitive, and returned to studying the map. Unseen behind him, hidden perfectly within the shadows, Pyo Wol watched in silence, memorizing every plan, every route, and every intention, already calculating his next move. The scene shifted to the 100-flower room, where the Amei sect was currently residing. Jianghua was seen instructing her junior sister, Seo Ran, to return to Mount Amay at first light the following morning. Seol Ran frowned. She asked for the reason behind such a sudden order, but Jonghwa dismissed her question outright. She told her there was nothing left for her to do here and that she should return and stay by their master's side. The negotiations with the Black Cloud Corps had been successful, and for now there were no remaining tasks. Seol Ran argued back, pointing out that a clash with the Qingqing sect could happen at any moment, and her presence might be needed. However, One-Eyed Jonghwa coldly replied that it would not be a problem. The mercenary group would serve as their meat shields, and Seol Ran should simply follow orders. With a quiet sigh, Seol Ran finally agreed. She told Jonghwa she would leave at dawn and bowed in farewell. Later that night, Jianghwa's niece, Lady Wu, arrived carrying a tray of fresh fruits. Jonghwa asked her why she had come. Lady Wu replied cheerfully that she simply wanted to keep her company, as she might feel lonely. Jonghwa narrowed her eye and commented that Lady Wu looked unusually bright and healthy, asking if she was seeing someone. Lady Wu smiled and admitted it. In her mind, the image of Pyo Wol surfaced. She told Jonghwa that the man was quite useful. Then, lowering her voice, Lady Wu said that he might be the one who killed Nam Hosen, the young leader of the Thunder Clan. Jonghwa stiffened. She asked if Lady Wu was certain of such a serious claim. Lady Wu hesitated and admitted she was not completely sure. There was no concrete evidence yet. However, she promised that if she confirmed it, she would personally bring him to Jonghwa. Jonghwa leaned back, her expression easing slightly, and agreed. She then began to ask the man's name. Before she could finish her sentence, a scream rang out from somewhere within the compound. Both women rushed toward the sound. Outside one of the rooms, several disciples stood frozen in terror, their faces pale with shock. One of the girls, trembling, finally spoke. She stuttered that Gongsun, a disciple of the Amay sect, had been killed. An assassin had struck. And according to what she had seen, the killer had been sent by the Qingqing sect. The next day, the captain and vice-captain of the Black Cloud Corps were seen walking through the 100-flower room, discussing the shocking news. A second-generation disciple of the Amay sect had been assassinated inside the 100-flower room itself. The captain frowned deeply. He wondered aloud if he had chosen the wrong side to cling to. However, the vice-captain calmly reassured him. In his view, this was actually a favorable outcome for them. The more shaken the Amay sect became, the more they would come to rely on the Black Cloud Corps. Still, both of them shared the same unease. An assassin of such caliber operating within Sichuan was troubling. It had been 7 years since the fall of the Blood Shadow Group, and since then, not a single assassin organization had dared to set foot in Sichuan. The captain muttered that an orthodox, prestigious sect would never openly hire an assassin. The vice-captain paused, then asked quietly, "Could there be a third party involved?" At those words, the captain's thoughts immediately drifted to Pyo Wol, and to the threat he had casually spoken during their last encounter. He quickly asked whether the man assigned to watch Pyo Wol had reported anything unusual. The vice-captain replied that the report stated Pyo Wol had not left his room for the past 4 days. The captain pressed him again, asking if he was absolutely certain. The vice-captain nodded firmly. He was sure. After a brief silence, the captain exhaled and said they should stop investigating Pyo Wol and instead focus entirely on monitoring the movements of the Qingqing sect. Elsewhere in the 100-flower room, One-Eyed Jonghwa was explaining the situation to the Black Cloud Corps captain. She stated that their disciple had been killed by an assassin and demanded that he examine the wounds himself. The captain carefully inspected the body. The wound on the disciple's neck was unnaturally thin and precise, far too sharp to have been made by a sword. There was no tearing of the flesh, no curling of the skin. It was as if something like a silver wire had been used, clean, exact, and merciless. Jonghwa asked him if he had ever seen such an injury before. The captain shook his head. She then asked if he suspected anyone. Once again, the captain's mind flashed to Pyo Wol, but he dismissed the thought almost immediately. It couldn't be him. Lowering his gaze, he apologized and told her that he had no answers that would satisfy her. Jonghwa clenched her fist and asked when the Black Cloud Corps' forces would arrive in Chengdu. The captain replied that it would take at most 2 days, though the Qingqing sect would surely become wary if cavalry entered the city. At that moment, Jianghwa's aura surged violently. She declared coldly that it did not matter, they could crush the Qingqing sect in an instant. The captain stiffened in shock and asked if she was suggesting an immediate full-scale frontal assault. But One-Eyed Jonghwa was no longer listening. Her rage had consumed her completely. She no longer cared about strategy or consequences. All she wanted was to obliterate the Qingqing sect, no matter the cost. Seeing her state, Both the captain and the vice-captain exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. Unseen by any of them, Pyo Wol stood quietly in the shadows behind one-eyed Jonghwa. He watched her trembling fury, her overflowing killing intent, and calmly observed that everything was unfolding exactly as he had planned so far. Later that night, the captain of the Black Cloud Corps was seething with rage. One of his men lay on a hospital bed, both of his eyes gouged out, his face wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. The captain turned sharply toward Hyo Ranju and demanded to know how this had happened. With her head lowered, she replied quietly that she had gone to see Pyo Wol, and that things had spiraled out of control. The captain slammed his fist down and shouted at her to explain everything properly. Taking a breath, Hyo Ranju began recounting what had happened earlier that day. Pyo Wol had been sitting alone in a restaurant, eating his meal in silence. He simply wanted to eat in peace. That was when Hyo Ranju approached him, her movements deliberate, her expression flirtatious. Pyo Wol did not look up. He continued eating as if she did not exist. Unbothered, she sat down anyway and began speaking to him casually, telling him that she had come to check whether he was doing well. She added that she also wanted to apologize. Only then did Pyo Wol finally glance at her. His voice was calm and indifferent as he asked a single question. What for? She told him that their behavior the other day had been disrespectful, and that he might have been surprised by it. Pyo Wol replied indifferently that he did not really care. Hearing this, Hyo Ranju felt anger surge inside her. After being treated like that, he truly did not care at all. Still, outwardly she maintained the smile of a sly fox. She asked again what he thought about the offer their captain had made, joining the Black Cloud Corps. She added that she would treat him well if he accepted. At that moment, a large, burly man approached Hyo Ranju and complained that she had left without saying a word. They knew each other from being in the same group. Annoyed, she told him to get lost and stop following her. The man laughed foolishly and said he had no time to follow her. He was there because the captain had sent him to fetch her. Then he noticed Pyo Wol and remarked that he was very handsome, his gaze filled with blatant lust. Hyo Ranju immediately warned him not to get greedy over Pyo Wol. The man ignored her warning. He stepped closer to Pyo Wol, licking his lips as he leaned in. Calmly, Pyo Wol spoke. I'll forgive you once. Turn away by the count of 3. If you don't, I'll make sure you never see anything again for the rest of your life. The man scoffed arrogantly. What's this cutie yapping about? Pyo Wol began to count. 1, 2, 3. In an instant, his chopsticks flew toward the man's eyes. The burly man reacted quickly, blocking them with his massive hands and smashing the table beneath him, shattering it into pieces. But Pyo Wol was already gone. In the next moment, Pyo Wol appeared behind him. His flying daggers moved like shadows, silver wires wrapping tightly around the man's body and cutting deep into his flesh. The man screamed in agony and collapsed to his knees. Blood splattered across the floor. Pyo Wol grabbed the man's head. His expression was cold, terrifyingly calm. Then, without hesitation, he gouged out both of the man's eyes. Hyo Ranju screamed, repeatedly calling the man's name. It was over in seconds. Pyo Wol stood there silently, his daggers hovering around him as blood dripped to the floor. Hyo Ranju lashed out at him with her whip, but it was useless. Pyo Wol dodged effortlessly, her attack only managing to separate him from the wounded man. She glared at him and shouted that this should end here. The man had paid for his mistake and there was no need to spill more blood. Pyo Wol stared at her without saying a single word. Then he turned around and walked out of the restaurant. As he left, Hyo Ranju shouted after him, warning him to be careful. Their comrade was in that state because of him, and if he continued acting recklessly, he would not be able to avoid an unexpected misfortune. Pyo Wol did not care. He walked away calmly. Outside the restaurant, he noticed his sleeve had been torn and muttered that he needed new clothes. After hearing Hyo Ranju's explanation, the captain was stunned. At such a critical moment, one of their strongest warriors had been reduced to this pitiful state. Hyo Ranju clenched her fists and said that her pride had been crushed, and she would make Pyo Wol pay for this humiliation. The captain nodded coldly. They would dispose of him after the matter with the Qingqing sect was resolved. Once their cavalry regrouped, they would make their move. He ordered Hyo Ranju to make thorough preparations. Somewhere in the city, inside a small, secluded house, a man could be seen speaking from behind a wooden barrier. He was the Chengdu branch manager of the Hao clan, an information broker who dealt in secrets. Seated across from him was the head disciple of the Qingqing sect. The branch manager replied calmly that finding the assassin would be as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. The only clue available was that the killer had used a martial art belonging to the Qingqing sect. The head disciple asked whether there were any rumors of someone unusual or outstanding in Chengdu. After a brief pause, the man replied that there was indeed one person, a man named Pyo Wol. He possessed beauty capable of charming others, yet was also a ruthless master whose skill could not be described with words. The disciple asked whether Pyo Wol might be connected to the death of the Thunder Clan's young leader. The branch manager shook his head. He said he did not know. The disciple paid the agreed price for the information and left. Now alone, the branch manager leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. Could the killer truly be Pyo Wol? He reached for a notebook and opened it. Inside was compiled information about Pyo Wol. He intended to send this report to the Hao clan headquarters so they could uncover Pyo Wol's true identity. He smirked proudly. He's under our clan's watchful eyes now. Just as he was reading, a hand reached out from behind and took the notebook. The branch manager froze. He could not move a single muscle. Invisible threads bound his body, soul-reaping threads formed entirely from Pyo Wol's chi. His voice trembled as he asked, Who are you? Pyo Wol stood behind him, casually flipping through the notebook. I haven't been here long, he said calmly, yet you've already gathered this much information on me. The man swallowed hard and introduced himself as the Chengdu branch manager of the Hao clan. He warned that the Hao clan would not stand idle if he were harmed. Pyo Wol smiled faintly. I know, he replied. That's exactly why I'm here. The manager's eyes widened. Pyo Wol continued, I don't like my information spreading around without my permission. Fear flooded the man's face. What do you intend to do? Pyo Wol answered quietly, You already know. The manager's mind raced. Is he revealing himself openly just to silence me? Is he going to kill me? He begged for his life, insisting that no one else had seen the contents of the notebook yet. Pyo Wol denied it calmly. Just moments ago, he said, you were already casually speaking my name and selling my information. The man desperately pleaded with him to believe otherwise. Then suddenly Pyo Wol loosened the soul-reaping threads. The branch manager felt the restraint fade and thought he was free. In the next instant he lunged forward to attack. Pyo Wol smiled, as if he had expected nothing else. He flicked his fingers once. There was no sound. No pain. The branch manager's head separated from his body in an instant, never even realizing what had happened. From the darkness, Pyo Wol spoke softly. I'll be taking the notebook. He vanished into the shadows. Only the headless corpse of the Hao clan's Chengdu branch manager remained, standing silently in the room. Somewhere in the city a fire broke out. People ran through the streets in panic, shouting that war had erupted, that the Amei sect and the Qingqing sect had finally clashed. Disciples from both sides were slaughtering one another, each blaming the other for starting the conflict. Steel rang against steel, screams echoed through the streets and blood soaked the ground. Amid this mad dogfight, the captain of the Black Cloud Corps walked forward with his subordinates. He glanced at the corpses littering the road and muttered that this felt like a nightmare made real. Their hatred has reached the tipping point, the vice-captain said grimly. This clash was inevitable. A middle-aged man suddenly stepped forward, shouting for everyone to stop fighting. He was the Fire Dragon Room Master. Stop this madness, he cried. Before he could finish his sentence, a flying arrow pierced his body. He collapsed instantly. The moment he fell, the artisans of the Fire Dragon Room erupted in fury and joined the battle. At that point all hell broke loose. This has turned into a complete shitshow, the captain remarked coldly. Scanning the battlefield, he noticed that the Amei sect was clearly lacking manpower. He turned to his subordinate and issued a sharp order. Summon the entire Black Cloud Corps. A grim smile spread across his face. We're joining the fray. One-eyed Zhonghua strode through the chaos, walking past fleeing disciples without sparing them a glance. Her fury was unmistakable, radiating from her like a storm about to erupt. She came to a sudden halt as she encountered the head disciple of the Qingqing sect. The moment their eyes met, killing intent exploded between them. The head disciple pointed his sword at her and shouted, all of this happened because the Amei sect hired an assassin to kill our elder brother, Wu Gunsang. Jianhua's lips curled into a cold sneer. That's a blatant lie, she shot back shamelessly. You Qingqing dogs are the ones who dragged Sichuan into bloodshed. Without another word, the two clashed head-on, their weapons colliding with a deafening roar as qi surged violently around them. Amidst the chaos of battle, Xiao Ran pushed back the advancing disciples of the Qingqing sect, desperately trying to protect her fellow Ame disciples. Her strikes were precise yet restrained. She hesitated to kill even now. Beside her, an Ame disciple suddenly collapsed to the ground, her breathing shallow and broken. "Senior. Sister Seo Ran," the girl whispered. Seo Ran knelt beside her at once. "Circulate your aura," she urged. "I'll help you, just hold on." But it was already too late. The girl exhaled her final breath, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. Seo Ran froze, then pulled her into her arms. Her own tears fell freely as she trembled in grief. In that moment, she realized the truth. This war had begun because of Ame's actions, and her hesitation to oppose it had only allowed more of her sect's disciples to die. She could no longer evade responsibility. Her sorrow hardened into resolve, and as she raised her head, her eyes glowed with determination. Elsewhere on the battlefield, the captain of the Black Cloud Corps surveyed the carnage with a deep frown. "Where are our forces?" he muttered. "They should have arrived by now." It made no sense for the Qingqing sect to block them so thoroughly. Something felt wrong, unnaturally so. "Look into it," he ordered sharply. "Someone is adding fuel to this fire. Find them." A subordinate immediately set out, weaving through burning buildings and collapsing streets. Around him, fighters slaughtered one another mindlessly, consumed by rage. Then he noticed it. The sacred tree of Chengdu, towering, ancient, and tall enough to overlook the entire battlefield. Something felt off. He climbed its massive trunk, senses on edge. Suddenly something moved. An attack flashed toward him and he barely dodged in time. "There you are," he shouted. A cloaked figure in black stood calmly on a branch above him. Beneath the hood, deep red eyes gleamed in the darkness. Flying daggers danced through the air, their trajectories shifting unpredictably, as though guided by an invisible will. The man struggled desperately to evade them. Telekinetic swords? He thought in horror. Who in Sichuan could? It was too late. His body locked in place, unable to move or even breathe. The cloaked figure approached. In the next instant, his head was severed, blood spraying into the night. The hooded man was Pyo Wol. Around him, numerous corpses hung from the sacred tree, swaying gently as flames illuminated the city below. Pyo Wol gazed down at the burning battlefield in silence. On the ground, one-eyed Zhonghua knelt in defeat, her once overbearing arrogance completely shattered. She had been crushed by the head disciple of the Qingqing sect, her body barely able to move. He stared at her coldly, sword lowered. Seo Ran rushed forward, panic etched across her face. "Senior Sister Zhonghua," she cried. "Are you all right? Come, we need to return to the 100-flower room." She glanced warily at the Qingqing head disciple. He said nothing. Instead, he turned away and raised his hand. "Withdraw," he ordered his junior brothers. "All forces retreat." The Qingqing sect obeyed. The battlefield fell into uneasy silence. It was Ame's defeat. Cries rang out as news spread that one-eyed Zhonghua had been gravely injured. From the shadows above, Pyo Wol smiled faintly. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had planned. When dawn broke, bodies lay scattered across the ground, wrapped in white cloth. The mercenaries had been slaughtered brutally. The captain, furious, demanded to know who had done this. The sly man inspected the corpses carefully and concluded that they had all been killed by a single person. Judging by the size and shape of the wounds, the assailant had used either a short sword or daggers. Upon hearing that daggers were involved, the captain recalled the incident at the restaurant, where their perverted member had been brutally injured in a similar manner. Comparing the wounds, there was no longer any doubt. It was Pyo Wol. Enraged, the captain ordered his subordinates to bring Pyo Wol to him immediately. He wanted to interrogate him personally. At the same time, within the 100-flower room, the Ame disciples whispered among themselves in fear. One-eyed Zhonghua had been gravely injured, and many others had suffered as well. The memory of the previous clash still haunted them. Seo Ran arrived and commanded them to calm themselves. She ordered the disciples to reinforce the defenses of the 100-flower room, warning that the Qingqing sect might attack again at any moment. She also instructed them to send a messenger pigeon to the main sect immediately, informing them of everything that had happened and requesting reinforcements. The disciples acknowledged her orders and dispersed. Left alone, Seo Ran reflected on the deaths of Bangxian and the Thunder Clan's young leader. These incidents had driven the hostility between the Ame sect and the Qingqing sect completely out of control. Someone was deliberately fanning the flames, and she needed to uncover who was truly behind it. Meanwhile, one-eyed Zhonghua lay in bed, receiving treatment for her severe injuries. She muttered curses under her breath, spewing hatred toward the Qingqing sect. The physician warned her to calm down, explaining that her meridians had only just been stabilized. If her emotions continued to flare, the damage could become fatal. Jianghua snapped, threatening to cut off his head if he did not leave at once. Terrified, the physician fled the room. Jianghua clenched her teeth in frustration. If she remained in this weakened state, Xiao Ran would seize the initiative. She needed to recover, quickly. Just then the door creaked open. She snarled that she had already told the physician to leave, but the figure who entered was not him. A mysterious person stood there, cloaked in black. He asked quietly if she remembered him. Jianghua sneered and replied that she would never forget him, not for a single moment in the past 7 years. She mocked him, wondering aloud if she would remember even more clearly if he blinded her remaining eye. At those words, memory surged back. 7 years ago. The incident. The eye she lost. The man removed his hood. His red eyes glowed coldly. Pyo Wol. Jianghua's eyes widened in disbelief. She had been certain he was dead. The saint of martial justice himself had thrown him into the snake pit. No one could survive that. Pyo Wol replied calmly that he had indeed been thrown in. And now, he said, it's time for me to throw you down. He revealed the truth without hesitation. He was the one who killed her disciple and the Thunder Clan's young leader. Jianghua flew into a rage. Blood streamed from her eye as she screamed, asking if he truly believed he could survive after making an enemy of the Amei sect. Was he not afraid at all? Pyo Wol's voice was ice cold. You made me this way, he said. Didn't you? Without the Amei sect, I would never have been reborn as an assassin. To him, they were his creators. Jianghua demanded to know what he wanted. I want nothing, Pyo Wol replied. I only came to tell you what will happen next. He told her that today Chongyang, the head disciple of the Qingqing sect, would die. And he would be killed by one of the Amei sect's ultimate techniques. Snow cloud piercing strike, the very technique used by Xiao Ran, the youngest leading disciple of Amei. Jianghua's rage exploded. Her meridians ruptured violently, blood pouring from her eyes and mouth. She forced herself upright through sheer will, her body wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. She swore she would kill him. Pyo Wol merely smiled. If I die, he said, the kings, the sects, everyone, will spill each other's blood. The monsters hiding in the mountains will awaken. Even the saint of martial justice will pay the price. Jianghua reached out desperately, trying to grab him, but it was too late. I will drag them all out, Pyo Wol said softly. No matter where they hide. And I will devour everything, like a snake. Her strength failed her. Her meridians completely collapsed. One-eyed Jianghua died of internal injuries, cursing him until her final breath. Pyo Wol looked down at her lifeless body and spoke quietly. You should never have created something like me. Someone as horrifying as I should never have been born. Elsewhere, Hyo Ranju burst into the room where Pyo Wol had been staying, accompanied by 2 of her companions. They had come to capture him, but the room was empty. The surveillance they had set up confirmed that Pyo Wol had not returned since the previous night. Hyo Ranju sighed and facepalmed. She cursed herself for being foolish enough to fall for his looks and swore that if she ever met him again, she would skin him alive. The 3 of them wondered where he had gone, what he was doing now, and whether he was causing trouble yet again. At the Golden Heaven clan compound, Qingqing sect disciples patrolled the area restlessly. They spoke in hushed tones about how long they would be forced to remain on high alert, as everyone was uneasy knowing an assassin was roaming freely, killing people at will. One disciple angrily snapped at another, telling him not to speak of such things. It was bad luck. At that moment, a distant sound echoed through the air. A violent explosion erupted from one of the buildings. They instantly recognized the martial art used. Snow cloud piercing strike. Believing the Amei sect had infiltrated the area, the disciples rushed toward the source, calling out for their senior brother. But it was already too late. Moments earlier, the head disciple of the Qingqing sect, Chang Yob, had been meditating quietly in his room. As he opened his eyes, he froze. A black hooded figure was sitting calmly across from him. Chang Yob demanded to know who he was. The hooded man replied simply, Pyo Wol. The name struck Chang Yob like a blade. He remembered hearing it from the Hao clan. Narrowing his eyes, he asked why Pyo Wol had come in the middle of the night. Pyo Wol replied casually that anyone who visits at such an hour is rarely up to any good, and that applied to him as well. Chang Yob then asked the question that had been gnawing at him. Are you the one who killed the Thunder Clan's young leader? Yes, Pyo Wol answered without hesitation. Chang Yob pressed further, asking why, and whether Pyo Wol bore a grudge against the Qingqing sect. I bear grudges against both the Qingqing sect and the Amei sect, Pyo Wol replied. From that answer alone, Chang Yob deduced the truth. You also killed the Amei sect's disciple. He frowned. He had never heard of Pyo Wol before and demanded to know who he truly was. I am an assassin, Pyo Wol said coldly. The Amei sect made me one. The Qingqing sect made me a public enemy of Sichuan. Chang Yob's eyes widened in shock. The incident from 7 years ago, the one who killed Wu Gunsang? Yes, Pyo Wol replied, his voice chilling as he removed his hood. His red eyes glowed ominously in the darkness. Chang Yob drew his sword, his aura surging like a crane spreading its wings. He declared that Pyo Wol had made a fatal mistake by revealing himself and that he would end his life here and now. Pyo Wol only smiled at the man's ignorance and hollow bravado. Chang Yob charged. But before his strike could land, Pyo Wol's daggers were already moving, encircling him like predators. Invisible chi threads snapped tight, suspending Chang Yob in midair. Unable to move, Chang Yob watched in horror as Pyo Wol finished him using Amei sect martial arts. Send my regards to Zhonghua, Pyo Wol said quietly. In that moment, Chang Yob understood everything. Zhonghua was dead. The plan was complete. With his final breath, Chang Yob whispered, "We created a monster." The Qingqing disciples arrived too late, calling out his name in despair. Finding his corpse, their fury boiled over. They placed all the blame on the Amei sect, their hatred deepening beyond repair. From the shadows, Pyo Wol observed silently. His revenge was nearing completion. Once a reason appeared, it took only an instant for mass bloodshed to erupt. People killed each other day and night, endlessly without pause. At first, there were whispers, suspicions that someone might be manipulating events from behind the scenes. But those doubts quickly vanished. No one cared anymore. They fought like dogs and cats, driven by hatred and fear. All that mattered was killing the enemy standing right in front of them. Blood soaked the streets. Amidst this carnage, Yong Seo-ran walked through the chaos, her steps heavy. She let out a quiet sigh, thinking that this truly was hell on earth. She couldn't understand how things had spiraled into this nightmare so quickly. Lady Yong. She turned. It was Zhang Muriang. He told her he had information about the recent killings and about a man named Pyo Wol. The moment she heard that name, her breath caught. She remembered the assassin she had encountered in that cave years ago. She remembered asking his name. Was the same. Realization struck her like lightning. The scene shifted to Mount Amei. The Amei sect's abbess slammed her palm onto the table, the sound echoing through the hall. Tears streamed down her face as she learned of One-Eye Jianghua's death. Rage twisted her expression as she screamed the name. Pyo Wol. She demanded to know if he truly was the assassin from 7 years ago, if he was the one now driving both sects into mutual destruction. The woman delivering the report bowed her head and replied that this was what Lady Yong believed. The abbess clenched her fists. She couldn't comprehend how he could have learned Amei's techniques. The messenger hesitated, then explained that one of the slain Amei disciples had secretly carried a copy of a sect manual with her at all times, and that Pyo Wol may have learned the technique from it. The abbess exploded with fury. Why would anyone carry a secret manual so carelessly? She knew the Qingqing sect would never accept such an explanation. This bloodshed would not end with words. Rising to her feet, her eyes burning with cold resolve, she declared that she would personally capture the assassin and punish him for daring to mock the great Amei sect. Later, on Smithy Street in the Fire Dragon Room district, chaos erupted once more. Shouts echoed as Pebble brutally crushed the arms of several men. They were thugs, ones who had been harassing Tang Sochu for days. Tang Sochu lay on the ground, badly injured, blood pooling beneath him. Pebble snarled, cursing those sons of bitches, and asked Tang Sochu how he wanted to deal with them. Tang Sochu's eyes were bloodshot as he laughed weakly. "Do whatever you want," he said. "Just kill them. Kill all of them." Like a grim reaper receiving permission, Pebble nodded. One by one he slaughtered them. Those who had mocked Tang Sochu were now breathing their last. Pyo Wol stood nearby, watching silently. "This is your choice," he said calmly. "Look closely." At his command, daggers took flight, dancing through the air like living things, slicing through flesh without mercy. Smithy Street became a field of corpses. Tang Sochu laughed like a madman as he staggered to his feet, following Pebble through the carnage. When it was over, not a single enemy remained alive. Pyo Wol turned to Tang Sochu. "This is the weapon you made." Tang Sochu stared at the carnage in awe. "It's incredible, truly incredible," he muttered. I never imagined something I created could unleash this kind of power. He laughed again, wild and unhinged. Thanks to you I got my revenge, he said, then looked at Pyo Wol with a crooked grin. You need my help now, right? So tell me, how should I help you? Pyo Wol smiled. A man could be seen running desperately for his life. He was the leader of the Thunder Clan, who had been staying under the protection of the Qingqing sect. Behind him, like a divine executioner descending from the heavens, was Mu Zhang, the saint of martial justice. There was no escape. Mu Zhang caught up to him in an instant. His blade flashed, and the Thunder Clan leader's head was severed cleanly from his body, rolling across the ground as blood sprayed into the air. Mu Zhang stood there, trembling with rage. The news of Chang Yob's death had driven him beyond reason. Moments later, the Qingqing sect leader rushed over, his expression filled with shock and alarm. Mu Zhang, why would you kill the Thunder Clan leader? Mu Zhang turned on him, his killing intent erupting like a storm. Anyone connected to the death of our disciple will not be forgiven, he roared. It was because of this man's son that Chang Yob went to investigate, and because of that, he was killed. The sect leader took an involuntary step back. Mu Zhang's murderous aura was overwhelming, suffocating. He looked at Mu Zhang with deep concern, wondering what had truly happened in that underground cave 7 years ago. What could have changed him so drastically? Mu Zhang spoke again, his voice cold and resolute. I will not stay silent anymore. He turned to leave. I'm going to the city, to confront the Amei sect. But before that, I'll visit Gunsang's father, who lives in seclusion. With that, Mu Zhang leapt into the air and vanished. The Qingqing sect leader clenched his fists. If both of them start moving, the consequences will be disastrous. He immediately summoned the Justice Hall leader. Investigate everything that's happening, he ordered grimly. And if necessary, use force to subdue Mu Zhang. In the city, unrest simmered everywhere. People gathered in the streets, shouting angrily about the exorbitant prices at the inns, which had skyrocketed overnight. Yet no one dared to leave. The roads were far too dangerous now. This is all the Amei sect's fault, one man spat. Another hurriedly grabbed his sleeve. Lower your voice. If someone hears you, we'll be in serious trouble. Fear ruled the city. In a quiet room nearby, Pyo Wol sat calmly, reading through detailed information about the Black Cloud Corps, a notorious mercenary group. He now knew the captain's name. And the captain's most trusted subordinates were the same 3 men he had encountered before. He nodded in satisfaction, silently praising the house sect for their efficiency. Behind him, through the window, half the city burned, flames rising into the night sky as people slaughtered one another in endless conflict. Pyo Wol stared at the fire. How many people are still dying because of this war? He wondered briefly. Should he feel guilt? No. All guilt had been buried in that cave long ago. Now only repayment remained. The Amei sect, the Qingqing sect, they had created this monster. They had made him, and countless others, suffer for nothing. He would not rest until they paid for it. Even if, in the end, his own life was consumed by those same flames. In the 100-Flower Hall, chaos reigned. Injured disciples were carried in on stretchers one after another. Blood stained the floors as healers rushed to treat the wounded. At the center of it all stood Yong Seo-ran, calmly organizing everything, issuing orders without hesitation. The Black Cloud Corps captain, watching from nearby, couldn't help but admire her. A once-in-a-century talent, he thought. Since Jianghua's death, she had taken control of all major affairs. The Amei sect had hidden her brilliance for far too long. As they spoke, a sudden pressure descended upon the hall. An overwhelming aura, heavy, suffocating, filled with rage. Everyone froze. The abbess of the Amei sect had arrived. Anger burned in her eyes. And with her appearance, the chaos that gripped the world was about to escalate even further. The moment Abbess Gu Hua, the leader of the Amei sect, stepped inside, every disciple dropped to their knees in unison. Greetings to the abbess. The Black Cloud Corps captain and his sly companion also bowed deeply, followed by Yong Seo-ran, her head lowered in respect. The abbess did not respond. She simply stared at them, cold, sharp, and merciless. Footsteps echoed as someone came running in. It was Wai Sionha from the 100-Flower Hall. She rushed forward with her usual bright smile and bowed cheerfully. Abbess. Gu Hua's gaze cut into her like a blade. The smile vanished instantly. In a voice devoid of warmth, the abbess finally spoke. Everyone go inside. Her eyes shifted to the mercenary. You too. Seated at the head position inside the hall, Gu Hua rested her chin lightly on her hand. Who is Pyo Wol? Her gaze flicked toward Wai Sionha. You seem to have something to say. Wai Sionha flinched. The abbess leaned forward slightly. Do you know who he is? And how are you related to him? Wai Sionha's lips trembled. Words refused to come out properly. Guwa rose. She gripped Wai Sionha's face and pulled her close, their eyes inches apart. Answer me, she whispered coldly. And do not lie. Her voice suddenly dropped, terrifyingly sharp. Why did you become restless the moment his name was mentioned? Wai Sionha broke. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed to her knees. I didn't know it would turn out like this, she sobbed. I only wanted to use him. I never thought things would spiral out of control. Please, let me fix this. I'll capture him myself. I'll clean everything up. She begged, her voice cracking, eyes filled with desperation. Guwa listened quietly. Then she spoke. Pathetic girl. She placed her hand atop Wai Sionha's head. Who gave you the authority to kill the Thunder Clan's young leader? You were meant to live quietly, like a flower among men. As you always have. Hope flickered briefly in Wai Sionha's eyes. A mistake. Nearby, Sioran sensed it. Master, stop. Too late. Guwa's chi surged. A silent, devastating force passed through Wai Sionha's skull. Her body went limp instantly. She died without even understanding what had happened. A chill ran through everyone present. False hope shattered completely. Wai Sionha's ambition, to one day seize the position of Ame's leader, had ended at the hands of the very person who held it. Sioran screamed in fury. You didn't have to go that far. Her massive aura erupted as she faced the abbess, rage pouring out unchecked. She didn't do it on purpose. Killing her for this was unnecessary. Guwa smiled. So, she said calmly, you're finally showing your true colors. She turned away slightly. Learn this well. Leaders must make examples of people, so others never dare to repeat their mistakes. Her gaze sharpened. You'll understand when you rise higher. Until then, stop acting like a child. She waved her hand dismissively. Remove that body. Get it out of my sight. Then coldly. The 100-Flower Hall originated from the same roots as Ame. From today onward, it will be absorbed back into the sect. Sioran clenched her teeth until they bled. Powerless. She turned and stormed out. Guwa looked toward the mercenary captain. Captain Zhang, she ordered, mobilize your men. I want Pyo Wol hunted down. Later that night, deep within a dark forest, two figures hurriedly dragged a body wrapped in cloth. They dumped it carelessly onto the wet ground. For the dogs, one muttered. They left without looking back. Rain began to fall, quiet, relentless. Footsteps approached. A figure knelt beside the body and slowly uncovered the face. It was Pyo Wol. His expression did not change. He buried her with his own hands, then placed a simple stone at the grave. He sat beside it in silence. Finally he spoke. I won't apologize, he said softly. We were only using each other. The rain soaked into the earth. But I will avenge you. He looked down at the grave. I swear, those who did this to you will pay. He remained there, unmoving as the rain poured down. He had no true bond with her. Yet in death, she received more empathy from him than she ever had from her own sect. It was a cold night, and it ended in silence. Later that night, Pyo Wol stood alone in an abandoned area near an old well. Broken stone and shattered tiles littered the ground. His flying daggers moved on their own, circling, darting, and striking invisible targets with terrifying precision. Each flick of his fingers altered their trajectory, silent, lethal. He was preparing for the battle to come. Then, footsteps. Pyo Wol stopped. From the shadows, a familiar voice rang out. Hey! Ho Runju stepped forward, waving her hand casually as if greeting an old friend. Pyo Wol turned his head slightly. What do you want? He asked coldly. Bringing people with you? Two figures emerged behind her. The sly man smiled faintly, while the bald monk let out a booming laugh. To notice us despite hiding our presence, the monk said, you truly live up to your reputation. Runju crossed her arms. This is the last time I'll ask, she said. Join the Black Cloud Corps. Pyo Wol's eyes remained calm. And if I refuse? Her expression hardened instantly. Then we follow our client's request, she replied coldly. And kill you. The monk stepped forward aggressively. If you want to live, accept the offer. Enough, the sly man cut in, raising a hand. We're not here to kill anyone. Pyo Wol glanced at him. Then will you retract the mission? The sly man chuckled. No. Just hide yourself better than you are now. He continued casually. We've already told the Ame sect that you were killed by us. This is just cleanup. Pyo Wol's gaze sharpened. You betray your client that easily? Credibility is everything to a vagrant group. The sly man burst out laughing. That kind of thinking is outdated, he said. Especially in Chengdu right now. Besides, I don't dislike you. He tilted his head. Join us. Pyo Wol replied without hesitation. No. An assassin without credibility was nothing. Runju narrowed her eyes. An assassin talking about credibility. That meant he was already hired. Who would that be? Pyo Wol said nothing. His mind drifted. To fallen comrades. To Lee Sealman's final moments. To the terror, helplessness, and crushing despair she felt as her life faded away. I want them to feel the same. Runju's eyes widened suddenly. A woman, she shouted. That's your client, isn't it? It has to be. The sly man smirked. He's more sentimental than he looks. Runju snapped. How many times are you going to reject me? She screamed, pulling out her whip. What kind of woman is she? She charged. The whip cracked through the air. And missed. Pyo Wol didn't even move. Instead, the roof of the well shattered, fragments exploding outward like shrapnel. The debris slammed into Runju, sending her flying back, blood spraying. Her men caught her hurriedly. Where did he go? She yelled furiously. A calm voice answered from behind. I told you, said the Black Cloud Corps captain, stepping forward. Talking to him is pointless. He pointed upward. Look. Atop the broken roof, silhouetted against the night sky, Pyo Wol stood, black hood fluttering in the wind. The captain raised his hand. Kill him. Several men leapt forward. But it was already over. The flying daggers moved. A single flick of Pyo Wol's fingers. And bodies fell. Throats sliced. Limbs severed. Blood splattered the ground. In seconds, everyone who attacked lay dead. Silence returned. Pyo Wol looked down at the captain. You brought a lot of people, he said calmly, to kill one man. The captain smiled grimly. I was wondering if I should have brought more. Behind him, hundreds of Black Cloud Corps members revealed themselves, weapons drawn, waiting for a single command. Pyo Wol's aura surged. The air trembled. You'll regret this, he warned coldly. You should never have involved yourselves in my war. The daggers spun faster, circling him like predatory spirits. The battlefield was set. The battle was about to begin. People were chatting casually at an open restaurant when, suddenly, an explosion erupted from the rooftop above. Panic spread instantly. A man could be seen leading a group across the roofs, though in truth it was Pyo Wol being chased by mercenaries. Pyo Wol glanced down at the restaurant. In an instant he leapt down and knocked out several people. The ordinary civilians were stunned and furious, shouting at him, demanding to know why he was attacking them. Pyo Wol ignored them and struck a few more, deliberately provoking their anger. A crowd quickly gathered. Just then the mercenaries chasing Pyo Wol arrived. Seeing them together, the crowd assumed they were allies and angrily demanded to know who they were. The sly man immediately realized something had gone terribly wrong. The public now believed they were working with Pyo Wol. Pyo Wol turned back, gave them a sly smile and ran again. The enraged crowd refused to let the mercenaries pass. Seeing this, the blood monk stepped forward and told his companions to continue chasing Pyo Wol. He would handle the situation there himself. They abandoned him to face the furious mob. Elsewhere, the sects continued fighting as Chengdu burned. Flames lit the sky, screams echoed through the streets, and chaos reigned. Captain Zhang watched in disbelief. How can one assassin fool the entirety of Chengdu? He shouted, glaring at Pyo Wol. Do you even understand what you're doing right now? Pyo Wol stood calmly, staring at the burning city. Is everyone out there? He asked quietly. Even those who were hiding? He paused, then smirked. The results are a bit different from what I expected, but they're better than I imagined. Thanks to you. He spread his arms slightly. The battlefield is about to become even more beautiful. Runju lashed out in rage, cracking her whip toward him. Pyo Wol dodged effortlessly and leapt into the air. The sly man, Taoist Go, unleashed a sword strike, aiming to catch Pyo Wol midair. But invisible chi threads surrounded him. Pyo Wol stepped onto them as if standing on solid ground, manipulating his flying daggers freely. Taoist Go was shocked as countless daggers encircled him. He struggled desperately to block them, wondering how they could move with such autonomy. Pyo Wol stood calmly. With a single trigger, a dagger shot from Taoist Go's blind spot and severed his arm instantly. He screamed in unbearable pain. Go! Runju cried out. Before she could reach him, daggers slashed across her body. She screamed as well, unable to even see the blades. They were simply too fast. She watched in horror as Taoist Go collapsed to his knees before Pyo Wol. No! She screamed. Pyo Wol stared at the one-armed man without a shred of emotion. Then Captain Jang stepped forward, gripping his long spear. Stop! He roared, hurling the spear toward Pyo Wol. Pyo Wol could have dodged easily. Instead, he grabbed Taoist Go and used him as a human shield. The spear pierced straight through Taoist Go's body. Everyone froze. No! They screamed. Pyo Wol tossed the lifeless body aside, glanced back once, and disappeared. Runju rushed forward, clutching Taoist Go's body, sobbing desperately. Don't die, wake up, please. But it was too late. Even in his final breath, Taoist Go weakly smiled and whispered, Don't say unlucky things. I'm not going to die. His life faded. Runju screamed in grief, clutching his body, then turned toward Captain Jang with bloodshot eyes. Catch that bastard, she cried. Shred him to pieces. Captain Jang's fury reached its peak. Without another word, he set off in pursuit. Runju remained behind, holding Taoist Go's corpse, crying uncontrollably. These were the consequences of their own choices. The city was burning. From atop a cliff, Abbess Guwa gazed down at the raging inferno and exclaimed at the madness of the sight before her. Beside her, Ran spoke urgently. Master, we must rescue our allies of the Qingming sect and stabilize the situation immediately. The abbess nodded. She raised her hand and issued her command. All Ame disciples, descend at once. Advance into the fire dragon room. They are attacking the Qingming sect. At her order, the disciples leapt down like falling stars and charged into the chaos. Inside the fire dragon room, the sect leader received the report and turned pale. The Ame sect is coming? If they intervene now, we'll be at a severe disadvantage. Before he could issue new orders, a terrifying aura swept through the area. With a single step, Abbess Guwa arrived, tearing down the gates with overwhelming force. The fire dragon room leader stared at her in horror. WH. Her eyes flashed coldly. How dare you call me that? The leader swallowed hard and forced himself to speak. This is a matter between us and the Qingming sect. The Ame sect has no right to interfere. Guwa scoffed. Everyone knows that the Qingming sect and the Ame sect share the same roots. Do you take me for a fool? She raised her hand. Be silent. She charged. The leader barely managed to block her attack, but he was utterly overmatched. Blow after blow crushed his defenses, forcing him back helplessly. Just as Guwa prepared to land the final strike, clang, a massive sword intercepted her attack. Guwa's eyes widened in surprise. She looked up and recognized the man standing before her. It's been a long time, she said slowly. Sage Muzhong of the Qingqing sect. Muzhong stood tall, his aura overflowing, surpassing even the abbess's martial presence. I too am glad to see you, he replied. Though it seems the feeling isn't mutual. She frowned. Muzhong continued, his voice steady yet heavy with emotion. I waited 7 long years for this meeting. Had my senior brothers not rejected the proposal to obliterate the Ame sect, we would have met much earlier. His aura surged. Guwa felt it instantly. You've attained enlightenment, she muttered. This energy, it's something I've never felt before. Muzhong nodded calmly. A new martial art. She studied him carefully. I am familiar with all of Qingqing's techniques. I never imagined your sect had a martial art that exudes such impure and ominous energy. Muzhong snorted. Do not measure the Qingqing sect by your narrow standards. Our foundation is far deeper and vaster than the Ame sect. Guwa laughed. So vast that even a mere assassin managed to make fools of you? Muzhong's expression darkened. Assassin? What do you mean? The assassin you threw into the underground cave, Guwa replied coldly. He's still alive. Muzhong stiffened. That's impossible. He's dead. Did you check his corpse? She asked. Silence. Guwa laughed again. See? Neither you nor your people confirmed it. That negligence is why the world burns now. Mu Zhang recalled the red eyes staring back at him in that cave. Is he truly alive? He is the main culprit, Guhua said. He killed the Thunder Clan's young leader and ignited this chaos. The one who killed Zhonghua of my sect and Chang Yob of yours, it was him. Mu Zhang spoke slowly. You're saying we're being manipulated by a single assassin? That's right, Guhua replied. So let us eliminate him first. There's no telling what he's plotting even now. Mu Zhang's aura flared violently. I refuse. The air trembled. The one who ordered that assassination is standing right in front of me, he said coldly. How could I miss such a golden opportunity? He raised his sword and shouted, 7 swords of Yinjiang. Aid the fire dragon room and drive away these wicked Amei witches. At his command, 7 sword masters descended beside him. Total war erupted. Guhua sighed calmly. You are as stubborn as ever. I offered the simplest path, yet you chose the hardest one. Mu Zhang sneered. Pray for repentance with your death, old crone. Their gazes clashed. Their auras collided, shaking the battlefield. Far away, Pyo Wol sprinted through the city, mercenaries close behind him. Suddenly he felt the terrifying collision of energies erupting nearby. He stopped. A slow smile spread across his face. So, the main players have finally arrived. His red eyes gleamed. The final act had begun. The chase had reached the outer gates. The mercenaries thundered forward on horseback, yet they were still falling behind. Ahead of them, Pyo Wol seemed to fly, stepping on invisible threads of chi in midair, his movements defying logic. The captain's eyes widened. Even on horseback, we can't catch him? He clenched his jaw, watching Pyo Wol leap from thread to thread. So he really is forming chi threads and stepping on them? Rage burned in his chest. No matter what method he uses, he swore, I'll catch him. And I'll kill him. Memories surfaced, his childhood, fighting in filthy streets, half dead from hunger and wounds. Taoist Go had appeared then. He had lifted him up, trained him, shaped him into the man he was today. A teacher. A savior. And now, Pyo Wol had killed him. Attack him, the captain roared. Spears flew through the air like rain. Pyo Wol suddenly ran straight toward them. The mercenaries faltered in shock. In the next instant, heads flew. Steel flashed, blood sprayed, and bodies toppled as if sliced by an invisible blade. The counterattack was instant and merciless. Men fell from their horses before they could even scream. The captain stared in horror. It was like watching a snake constrict its prey, slowly crushing everything in its path. Soon, corpses and fallen horses littered the ground. Pyo Wol stood amid them, completely surrounded by the remaining mercenaries. The captain pointed his weapon at him, trembling with fury. I'll kill you with my own hands. Pyo Wol tilted his head. I don't understand. The captain snarled. What? Pyo Wol spoke calmly. Isn't this how everyone lives? Isn't this what the Jianghu is like? He gestured around them. You. The Qingqing sect. The Amei sect. You all kill people endlessly. How are you any different from me? His eyes narrowed. How many sacrifices do you think the Qingqing and Amei sects made to earn their reputations? He turned to the captain. And you, how do you think a vagrant organization this large survives? You must have killed 10 times the number of people standing here now. He paused, then smiled faintly. I merely created an opportunity. Pyo Wol closed his eyes. When he opened them, more heads fell from the horsemen encircling him. He continued coldly. Isn't the reason things have reached this point your greed and ambition? The captain ground his teeth. You're insane. Pyo Wol's daggers began to shine brighter than ever, circling him like stars. The captain frowned. Why would an assassin openly reveal his weapons? Suddenly, a massive surge of energy erupted from the wall behind them. The captain turned sharply. His heart sank. One of them, that aura, Abyss Guhua. And another. On the same level? High above, Abyss Guhua and Sage Mu Zhang were locked in battle, their auras colliding violently. Then, a single gleaming dagger flew between them. Both stopped. Their eyes followed it down. Below, amid the sea of corpses, stood a black-hooded figure. Xiaoran's breath caught. That assassin. Her eyes widened. Pyo Wol, from 7 years ago. Mu Zhang's pupils shrank. It's really you. Rage exploded from him. You're still alive? His roar carried terrifying power, forcing warriors nearby to clutch their ears in pain. Mu Zhang leapt from the wall, sword blazing, descending like a falling star. I'll finish what I failed to do 7 years ago. Pyo Wol looked up. Calm. Unfazed. A smile curved his lips. Everyone's finally gathered. Pyo Wol ran into an abandoned mansion with the Amei sect, Qingqing sect, and the mercenaries chasing him together. Sage Mu Zhang shouted furiously. Bastard! How long do you intend to keep running away? Xiao Ran sensed something was wrong and urgently called out. Master, stop. We're playing right into Pyo Wol's hands. But the old hag snapped back angrily. Shut up. Don't speak another word. Her frustration boiled over. The sage Mu Zhang. She had no idea what kind of martial art he had learned, yet he had overwhelmed her in an instant. And now that assassin brat was acting so arrogantly right in front of her. Just looking at him was unbearable. If I let him live, she thought, death will follow him wherever he goes, and the already crumbling reputation of the Amei sect will be completely destroyed. Although it lasted only a moment, she could not believe she had been pushed back, forced to chase after a mere fly. I must kill that assassin brat quickly, she decided, and then have a real fight with Sage Mu Zhang. That was what she was thinking as she chased Pyo Wol. Suddenly, a barrage of arrows rained down. Several disciples were struck and fell instantly. Hidden weapons, the disciples shouted. There are traps. The horsemen dismounted at once. What place is this? Someone asked. They had entered an old, abandoned estate filled with countless buildings, but it was no ordinary ruin. The old hag's expression darkened. He led us to the Tang clan estate. Mu Zhang roared. How dare you lead us into this filthy hole? Show yourself at once. At that moment, Pyo Wol appeared, standing atop a roof looking down at them all. His red eyes glowed beneath his hood. Mu Zhang glared up at him, cursing. The abbess also shouted angrily. What are you planning, bastard? Pyo Wol's mind drifted back 7 years, to the net they had once used to capture assassins. He spoke calmly. Etch this into your eyes. This is an inescapable heavenly net trap. An overconfident Qingqing warrior stepped forward, pointing at him. Demon. I'll take your head. He leapt from one rooftop to another, and the moment his foot landed, the trap activated. Daggers exploded into the air. He blocked one, then another. But there were too many. More daggers followed, their trajectories impossible to predict. One pierced his leg. Another stabbed into his back. In an instant, the man who rushed forward so arrogantly fell just as quickly. He crashed down dead. Panic spread through the disciples. How can there be so many hidden weapons in just a few steps? Only then did they realize. This was the Tang clan estate, and none of them understood it. Because this place had been prepared by Pyo Wol and Tang Sochu together. The hidden weapons. The extreme poisons. This place was far too dangerous. Fear became visible on their faces. Do we really have to fight him here? Some began to retreat. Just as one disciple stepped back, Xiao Ran shouted, Wait. Too late. Another barrage of arrows flew out. The disciple was struck and died instantly along with several others. Fall back, someone shouted. But it was already too late. Some disciples ran desperately for help, only to trigger another trap. Poison gas burst forth. They began choking, blood leaking from their mouths and noses. It was total annihilation. Then, a swarm of snakes surged out from hidden corners. Help! Their screams echoed through the estate. The abbess watched coldly and sneered. Come down this instant, Pyo Wol. I'll rip your damned head off myself. From atop the roof, Pyo Wol smiled faintly. Wait. The best is saved for last. Seeing the chaos unfold, Sage Mu Zhang stood in silence. Then he released his energy. The venomous snakes nearby were instantly obliterated. He glared at Pyo Wol and shouted, So it was you who clipped the wings of the Qingqing sect. You will pay for it with your life. Pyo Wol replied coldly, Pay with my life? Didn't you already make me pay 7 years ago? His red eyes burned. I have no more debts in this rotten world. All that remains is to collect. With that, Pyo Wol leapt from the wall and attacked. Mu Zhang snorted. Petty tricks. He swung his broadsword, but Pyo Wol was already behind him, flying daggers flashing through the air. Mu Zhang released his impure energy and struck backward, slicing through what he thought was Pyo Wol, only to realize it was merely his cloak. Pyo Wol stood several steps away, his face now fully revealed. You've changed, Mu Zhang said. All except those eyes. Pyo Wol answered, You're still the same. Except for yours. The battlefield fell silent. I won't let you escape this time, Mujang growled. He charged forward, sword slashing down with tremendous force. The ground trembled. Pyo Wol dodged effortlessly, weaving through every strike while his daggers surged forward like shadows. Mujang blocked and laughed. Not bad. You're no longer an ordinary assassin. They clashed again and again. Mujang's excitement grew. What kind of 7 years did he spend? His techniques were sharper than any martial master in Sichuan. It had been a long time since he wanted victory this badly. He steadied his breath, then lowered his sword into the ground. All right, he said calmly. His energy erupted at full power. Let's see if you can dodge this. He rushed forward and unleashed a 13th Azure Cloud Cleave, a brutal downward slash meant to split Pyo Wol in two. He won't escape unscathed, Mujang thought, smiling. But the smile froze. Pyo Wol bled, only slightly. He caught the blade between two fingers. The battlefield went silent. Mujang's eyes widened in shock. With a cracking sound, Pyo Wol activated the starving demon saber secret art, Jade Destruction. The legendary sword, passed down for generations, never once damaged, shattered into pieces, leaving only the hilt. Mujang stared in disbelief. How did you? Before he could finish, something pierced him from behind. Blood spilled. Abyss. Guwa, Mujang gasped as he collapsed. The old hag smiled coldly. You did great, Sage Mujang, she said, but now I will finish him. Her mask fell away, revealing her true, ugly nature, the real face of the so-called righteous Amei sect leader, smiling proudly as she took her place. Sage Mujang bled heavily, yet he still struggled to stand. Gritting his teeth, he glared at the old hag. Cowardly bitch, you actually struck me from behind? She smirked. So what if I did? Her laughter rang cold across the battlefield. Don't you know this already? The Jianghu only recognizes the victor. If you couldn't dodge or block my attack, blame yourself. Blood spilled from Mujang's mouth as he spoke again, his voice shaking. You are the leader of the Amei sect. Aren't you ashamed to do this in front of everyone? Silence fell. All eyes were fixed on them. Every disciple had clearly seen it. The Amei abbess stabbing the sage of Qingqing from behind. Yet the shameless old hag only laughed louder. They saw only one thing today, she said arrogantly. The moment the Amei sect became the final victor and began its rule over Sichuan. Her eyes turned cruel. And even if they saw something else, they'll only be able to speak of it in the afterworld. Mujang roared in fury. Demoness, do you truly believe the Amei sect will endure? It is already weakening, and it's because of you. She ignored him completely. Are you done talking? She asked casually. Her staff pierced him again. Worry about the Qingqing sect instead, she sneered. The Amei sect I will build will last forever. She charged forward once more. The Qingqing sect has lost its pillar, Sage Mujang, she declared. It will collapse pathetically. With a violent thud, Mujang fell to the ground. Lifeless. Master. The Qingqing disciples screamed in disbelief. How did this happen? The old hag snorted and slowly turned her gaze toward the man still standing. She glared at Pyo Wol. To a certain extent, she said, I should thank you. Though you caused quite a disturbance, it was thanks to your actions that such an unthinkable opportunity presented itself. Pyo Wol stared at her coldly. She smiled. As thanks, I will grant you pain you won't forget, even in death. Now only the two of them remained, facing each other. If not for your greedy ambitions, Pyo Wol said quietly, I would have lived as a normal man wandering the world. His voice hardened. I truly wanted that life. His daggers began to swirl. But your greed turned me into an assassin. He stepped forward, one step at a time. Look at me, he said. Look at the monster you created. They clashed. Flying daggers versus the abbess's staff. How proud you must be, Pyo Wol continued coldly, striking again. At how well your monster turned out. She defended fiercely, counterattacking without pause. Pyo Wol staggered slightly under her pressure, but then surged forward and struck her staff directly. A violent explosion of energy erupted. Shock spread across every remaining witness. The old hag steadied herself and smiled. At your level, you have no chance of victory. She swung again, golden rampant strike, a blinding flash tearing through the air. Pyo Wol stood firm. Then he vanished. The daggers remained. One blade passed her cheek. Then dozens more filled the sky. The old hag slammed her staff into the ground, releasing a massive shockwave that froze every dagger midair. She laughed. Is that all you're capable of? Pyo Wol crouched with one hand pressed against the ground, staring at her coldly. Let's find out. Only then did she realize. His hand was glowing. Too late. Energy threads surged upward from beneath the earth, coiling tightly around her legs. She froze. Trapped. Pyo Wol charged forward in a blinding flash. He seized her leg and yanked it upward, throwing her completely off balance. The old hag's eyes widened in absolute shock. She had never even imagined something like this. In that instant, Pyo Wol activated his martial art, Swift Wind. At the same time, another power ignited within him. Black lightning. Swift Wind pushed his mind to its absolute limit, accelerating his thoughts beyond reason. Black lightning flooded his body, forcing his physical abilities past their breaking point. This was his one chance, and he took it. Pyo Wol vanished. The old hag couldn't even perceive him. A moment later, a fist slammed straight into her abdomen. The impact came at the speed of sound. She never saw the attack. She never felt it coming. Blood exploded from her mouth as her body flew backward, crashing into the ground. Completely defeated, Pyo Wol stood tall, staring down at the end of his long-awaited revenge. Master! Seolran screamed as the old hag crawled weakly across the ground, blood pouring endlessly from her lips. She couldn't understand what had happened. She hadn't seen an attack. She hadn't sensed an attack. To be brought down in a single blow. Was it really not a fluke that he fought Sage Mujong on equal ground? She thought. What kind of monster did we create? At this rate, he would surpass even Sage Mujong. Desperation twisted the old hag's face. She screamed, calling out to her disciples. Seolran, Black Cloud Corps Captain. Kill him. Both of them stiffened. But they obeyed. They rushed forward. Pyo Wol looked down at her coldly. Disgusting, he said. To sacrifice 2 lives just to save your own. His eyes sharpened. Pathetic. He moved again. Do you think I'd let such a chance slip away? He brushed past the Black Cloud Corps captain in an instant, heading straight for the old hag. The captain roared and thrust his spear forward. With a mere twitch of his fingers, Pyo Wol manipulated his flying daggers. One was deflected by a hair's breadth. But it wasn't enough. 3 blades pierced straight through the captain's body. He fell, dead before he even hit the ground. Now only Seolran remained. She charged forward desperately. Stop. Pyo Wol moved effortlessly. Stop. He didn't slow. He brushed past her. No counterattack. No hesitation. He didn't even spare her a glance. Seolran froze, stunned. Why? She whispered. Why didn't he strike her? There was no answer. Pyo Wol now stood before the gravely wounded old hag. Face to face. This was the end. The revenge he had waited for 7 long years. Venomous energy seeped from his body, engulfing her completely. Her vision warped. Black snakes crawled over her skin, coiling tighter and tighter. Hallucinations born of terror and poison. She screamed, cursing him. In her eyes, Pyo Wol transformed. A massive white serpent with crimson eyes, staring down at her, waiting to devour her whole. If it weren't for you, she screamed hysterically, Sichuan would have been mine. Even at death's door. Her greed remained. Pyo Wol raised his blade. With a single clean stroke, her head fell. The greedy old hag was dead. The false morality that had poisoned the Jiang died with her. Pyo Wol stared at her lifeless body. Is that all you had to say for your last words? He turned away. Disappear from my life forever. And with that, the revenge he had carried for 7 years came to an end. The captain was not dead but heavily injured. He stood up and, along with Seolran, saw the dead leader of the Amei sect. The battlefield fell completely silent as everyone stared at the scene, the assassin standing tall and the abbess of the Amei sect, taken out in a single strike. The Amei disciples could not believe that their leader had been defeated in such a pathetic state. Some whispered, asking whether he was even human. Someone called him a reaper. Pyo Wol merely glanced at them. That single look made them shudder in fear. The disciples trembled, losing all motivation to fight. They believed it was impossible to defeat him. One of them, overwhelmed by terror after seeing Pyo Wol's red eyes, broke down crying and ran away. Seolran knew they were finished. Everyone had been completely overwhelmed by him, the assassin they had despised so much. He had cut down the leaders of both the Amei and Qingqing sects in an instant and seized control over Sichuan. She wondered what she should do now and what the future of the Amei sect would become. She looked at Pyo Wol, wanting to speak, but just as she was about to call out, something unexpected happened. The supposedly dead sage Mu Zhang began to transform, releasing an ominous energy. His appearance changed drastically. His skin burned red, his eyes turning blood-colored, and he screamed as he went berserk. His disciples cried out, asking if their master was all right, but the sage did not answer. He seized his broadsword instead. Someone pointed out in shock that the ominous energy pouring out of him was demonic energy. Everyone was stunned. The elder of the Qingqing sect had learned demonic arts. Blinded by rage, Sage Mu Zhang charged at Pyo Wol, screaming that he would kill him. Pyo Wol calmly observed his movements, which were now completely different from before, faster, sharper, and eerily similar to his own. Pyo Wol dodged his attacks and analyzed him carefully. There were no gaps, but it was clear, Mu Zhang was no longer in his right mind. The demonic energy had already invaded his consciousness. That was enough. Pyo Wol manipulated his flying daggers, forming an encirclement above his head. In an instant all the daggers attacked together. The sage was slashed and pierced repeatedly, yet he still charged forward like a madman. But it did not last long. The demonic energy corroded his body, his skin turning pale as he collapsed to the ground, breathing his last. A Qingqing Taoist stepped forward and asked Pyo Wol to stop. His expression was sincere as he rushed to Mu Zhang's side. Seeing that Mu Zhang was dying, he asked why he had learned demonic arts. In a faint voice, Mu Zhang replied that everything he had done was for the sake of the Qingqing sect. With those final words he died. Holding him gently, the Taoist spoke softly, saying that it had been foolish. The honor of the Qingqing sect that Mu Zhang had tried so desperately to protect had been completely destroyed because of those demonic arts. With the leaders of both sects dead, a single thought spread through everyone's mind. Sage Mu Zhang of the Qingqing sect had practiced demonic arts, and Abbess Gu Hua of the Amei sect had cowardly stabbed the Qingqing sect in the back. And even after all that, they still could not take down a single assassin. From this day onward, the flow of Sichuan Murim would change because of one man. After some time, Xiao Ran approached Pyo Wol and respectfully called him Sir Pyo. She asked if he would allow the Amei sect to retrieve their leader's corpse and bring it back to the mountain. Seeing her bow before him, one disciple shouted in protest, asking how she could bow to the murderer of their sect leader. Xiao Ran shot the disciple a fierce glare, silencing her instantly. She understood that seeking revenge now was impossible. They had to find a way to survive. She bowed deeply before Pyo Wol once again. The Qingqing representative followed suit, asking for permission to collect Mu Zhang's corpse and retreat. He also bowed deeply. All eyes turned to Pyo Wol, waiting for his response. After a moment of silence, Pyo Wol coldly asked whether if he let them go they would scheme revenge one day, just as he once had. Xiao Ran hurriedly swore upon her name that the Amei sect would never seek revenge. The Qingqing sect made the same vow, declaring that all grudges would end here. Pyo Wol asked how he was supposed to believe them. Both bowed again, promising with complete sincerity. Seeing their resolve, Pyo Wol finally agreed. Looking up at the clear sky, he told them to leave. With this incident, all of Sichuan Murim fell into decline. The Amei and Qingqing sects, which had fought fiercely for power, ceased all activity. Other sects shut themselves away, focusing only on recovery. Countless people suffered immense losses. Yet not a single person dared to even dream of seeking revenge against Pyo Wol, the legend known as the Reaper. Sometime later, on a clear and sunny day, Pyo Wol could be seen casually napping on a small floating boat in the middle of a lake. Tang Socha called out his name. Pyo Wol glanced over and smiled faintly. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. However, as time passed, news spread that a single assassin had razed the entire Sichuan Murim to the ground. Certain forces, intrigued by who he was, began to move. New upheavals were bound to follow.